Chapter 147. The lady in white looked very petite, and she was holding a stone sword in her hand. It looked simple, but the edges were very sharp. Her beauty was pleasing to the eyes in Chi Yu's eyes, but it was still lacking compared to Wenting and Snow Girl. From this lady, Chi Yu could feel some energy aura that wasn't very strong. Who are you? We are chasing the evil members of our race. What does that have to do with you? Get out of the way. The lady in the lead said to Chi Yu impolitely. Chi Yu smiled and said, "Of course it has nothing to do with me. However, don't you know that the Julie people are getting restless? We humans are all on the same side, so why are we fighting amongst ourselves? Aren't we just letting them reap the benefits?" The lady's expression changed slightly, and she said, "Which race are you from?" Chi Yu thought for a while and said, "I'm from the Earth race." After all, the Earth race was the direct descendant of Emperor Huang, so there was nothing wrong with his answer. "What about you?" The lady's expression became slightly better, but her gaze towards Chi Yu was still full of suspicion. "You are from the Earth race? I have never heard of anyone from the Earth race that can fly. I am Yu Xing from the Yu race." Chi Yu's eyes flashed. So she was from the Yu race, one of the four main races of the human race. Previously, he had heard from Green Dragon Jean and I that the Bai race and the Yu race produce the most handsome men and beautiful women. It seemed that this was true. Just because you have never heard of it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. "Lady, I am the son of the Earth race's high priest, Iruah." Chi Yu thought for a while and felt that it was more appropriate to reveal this identity. "What did you say?" To Chi Yu's surprise, the Yu clansmen in front of him revealed shocked expressions at the same time. The way they looked at Chi Yu changed drastically. Not only did their original hostility disappear, but it was replaced by respect. Even the young man with the black aura looked at Chi Yu with reverence in his eyes. Yu Xing said, You are the son of the Earth Clan's great priest Iruah, the one who has obtained the Xianyuan divine sword, the human race's new Emperor Huang." Chi Yu looked at Yu Xing, dumbfounded. He thought to himself, when did news spread so fast in this era? What he didn't know was that the appearance of the Xianyuan divine sword had shaken the entire human world. The four main races all received the news. Originally, the Earth race's position among the four main races was just below average. After all, the appearance of the Earth race could not be compared to the White race and the Yu race. Although the Yu race was not the most powerful race among the four main races, they were the most arrogant race. Their appearance was also the most outstanding among the four main races. However, when the news that the owner of the Xianyuan divine sword was the son of the Earth clan's high priest spread, the Earth race's position immediately returned to being the first race of the human race. The new Emperor Huang had appeared, and he was the hope of all humans. Thus, the Yu clansmen here were already aware of this. After hearing Chi Yu's words, Yu Xing no longer found it strange that Chi Yu could fly. Scratching his head, Chi Yu smiled bitterly and said, "You are not wrong to say that. However, I do not dare to call myself the new Emperor Huang." Yu Xing said fervently, No. If you can obtain the Xianyuan divine sword, you will be the new Emperor Huang of the human race. In our eyes, you are the most powerful being. Only you can lead us to defeat those evil Julie people." As she spoke, she had already bowed to Chi Yu on the bird's back. Behind Yu Xing, a young man riding on a white bird said in a low voice, "Sister Xing, we need him to prove his identity." Startled, Yu Xing raised her head to look at Chi Yu. With Chi Yu's sixth sense, he naturally heard their conversation. He shrugged helplessly and said, "How do we prove it? Do you want me to show you the Xianyuan divine sword?" "I am sorry, but the Xianyuan divine sword has its own intelligence. It does not listen to me." Chi Yu did not have much hope for the Xianyuan divine sword. No matter how powerful the traceless cloud divine weapon was, it did not listen to his commands and could suck his HP dry at any time. Chi Yu was not interested. In his heart, he thought that rather than relying on the Xianyuan divine sword, it was better to rely on his own strength. Yu Xing was also in a difficult position. However, her position in the Yu clan was not low. After hesitating for a moment, she immediately said, "How about this, Your Majesty Emperor Huang? Let's go down first. After we deal with this evil traitor, we will come back to determine your identity." What do you think? Chiyu had an idea and said, "Please do not call me Emperor Huang. My name is Chiyu. You can just call me by my name. What is going on? How did this brother become a traitor?" Yuxing glared at the man in black in front of her and said, "He is a traitor of our clan. We cannot tolerate the evil things he has done. We must bring him back to the clan to deal with him." After hearing Yuxing say this, the man in black finally spoke. His voice was very pleasant. No, I'm not a traitor. I have never hurt anyone, nor do I want to hurt anyone. I also do not know why I became like this. I am also a member of the Yu clan. Xing, we have been friends for so many years. Is it because of the change in my appearance that you find it so hard to face? Yuxing coldly snorted and said, "Just a change in appearance? Tell me, what have you been doing these past few days?" Just as she said this, Chiyu said, "Wait a minute, everyone. How about this? Since you all have your own opinions, let's go down and talk. It is pointless for you all to talk while flying. It is better to go down and talk." Although Yuxing could not confirm Chiyu's real identity, she had basically accepted this new Emperor Huang based on the fact that Chiyu could fly. She nodded and said, "Okay, then let's go down and talk." "No, I cannot go down with you. You will kill me." The man in black's eyes were filled with fear. He flapped his wings and turned to run. However, with the help of Kirin's silk, although he was good at flying, how could he run away? If he ran away, Chiyu would not be able to live in this world anymore. "Brother, don't panic." Chiyu waved his right hand and used his cloud force to create a strong suction force. The man in black had just spread his wings when he was forcefully pulled back and landed next to Chiyu. Good people should not be treated unjustly. Since you say that you're not a traitor or an evil person, why are you afraid to go back with them? The black-clothed youth looked at Chiyu in panic and said, No, I can't go back. They won't listen to my explanation. Even if I explain, they won't believe me. However, I'm really not an evil person. I beg you, Great Huang Emperor, please let me go." Chiyu frowned slightly as he looked at the black-clothed youth. He could indeed sense a sinister aura from the latter's body. He frowned slightly and said indifferently, "How about this? I will be your guarantor. Even if they don't listen to your explanation, I will. As long as you can give a reasonable explanation and prove that you are not an evil person, I promise that nothing will happen to you. In the name of the Xianyuan sword." In the name of the Xianyuan sword? Of course, this was just a casual remark. However, for humans in this era, such an oath was obviously very effective. Hearing what Chiyu said, the man in black immediately softened. He looked at Chiyu and nodded lightly. "All right then, Your Majesty the Yellow Emperor, please make the decision for me." Yuxing frowned and said, "Your Majesty Huang Emperor." "Oh no, Chiyu. Are you going to be his guarantor?" Chiyu said, "I have always supported the principle of not letting a bad person go, but never wrongly accusing a good person." Yuxing's eyes lit up and said, "As expected of Your Majesty Huang Emperor. Your words really have a deep meaning." Hearing this, Snow Girl and Wenting, who were next to Chiyu, couldn't help but giggle. Although Chiyu was thick-skinned, he couldn't help but blush. He quickly covered up his embarrassment and said, "Let's go down first." As he said this, he used energy to control the man in black and brought Wenting and Snow Girl down into the forest. Only when they entered the forest could they feel the greatness of the forest. There were giant trees that were up to 30 meters tall. In the forest, the air became more fresh and comfortable. The temperature, fresh air, and the forest was full of vitality. This was definitely a good place to talk. Chiyu let go of the energy control on the man in black and said, "All right, now it's time to tell me what's going on." Just as Yuxing was about to speak, she was stopped by Chiyu. "Let's listen to his explanation, okay? Even if he is really evil, we should give him a chance to defend himself, right?" As a Qilin, Chiyu naturally exuded a noble aura. Seeing his ordinary appearance, Yuxing could not muster the slightest thought of resisting and nodded silently. The large birds they had been riding had now docilely moved to the side, while her clansmen had already surrounded the black-clothed youth. Each and every one of them raised their weapons as if they were ready to fight at any time. Chiyu nodded at the man in black and said, "Now I'll give you a chance to explain. You can speak now." The man in black looked at Yu Xing with some fear. In the forest, his face seemed to look much better. He was not as pale as before. The black aura around his body gradually disappeared. To Chi Yu's surprise, the pair of strange wings on his back also disappeared. Even the two protruding fangs in his mouth were retracted. At this moment, he looked completely like an ordinary human. Your Majesty, the great Huang Emperor, please uphold justice for me. I really am not a bad person, nor am I evil. Even I don't know why all of this happened. I can only say that I am very unlucky. At this point, a few drops of tears flowed down from the man's eyes. His emotions were very real. Chi was sure of this. He didn't interrupt and listened to the man in black. The man in black stabilized his emotions and said, "Here's what happened. I am a member of the Yu clan, a warrior of the Yu clan. Yu Xing and the others can prove this. Just 3 months ago, I left the place where I lived and went to the cave in Jia Mountain, trying to find a giant beast companion that could help me. That was when my disaster came. That day, I sneaked into Jia Mountain alone. The range of Jia Mountain wasn't very big, so I was very careful. Although giant beast companions can help us, they're also very dangerous. If I don't get their approval, my life might be in danger. So, after I entered the range of Jia Mountain, I was a little nervous. I didn't have any experience, and I didn't have any friends in the clan who could help me. I could only rely on my own strength. Although I asked the clansmen who had giant beast companions before I went to Jia Mountain and gained some experience, I was still very nervous when it was my turn to do it myself. At this point, his eyes looked a little blurred, as if he had returned to the scene at that time. Because of Chi Yu, Yu Xing and the other Yu clan members didn't stop him from continuing. They only listened with cold expressions. Smiling, Chi Yu's eyes showed a trace of gentleness. He said, "You becoming like this should have something to do with your giant beast companion, right?" The youth in black nodded. "Yes, if I knew that going to Jia Mountain would make me like this, why would I go? Even if I can't become a strong warrior, I can still continue living in the clan. However, it's too late to say anything now." That day, after I carefully entered Jia Mountain, I walked while looking for traces of giant beasts. However, I was disappointed to find that I didn't see any signs of giant beasts even after walking into the depths of Jia Mountain. After half a day, my confidence started to waver. Just at this time, I suddenly found a cave, so I walked over. At that time, because I had already been in Jia Mountain for quite some time, the anxiety in my heart had dissipated. It wasn't as intense as it was at the beginning. As soon as I arrived at the entrance of the cave, I smelled a faint fishy smell. I couldn't help but be startled. I thought that this should be the smell of a giant beast. I secretly prayed that it was a gentle giant beast. Hearing his words, Wen Ting couldn't help but ask, "Didn't you think that it would be dangerous at that time?" The strength of giant beasts isn't something that humans can compare to. If you met a ferocious beast, what would you do? I'm afraid that you would lose your life there. The youth in black smiled bitterly. It's not that I didn't think about it, but how can it be possible to obtain great power without going through a dangerous process? Having a giant beast companion was too attractive to me. I've never been liked by the clan members. However, if I could become a giant beast warrior, my position would be completely different. So, I didn't hesitate much and entered the cave. After entering the cave, the fishy smell became more obvious. As I walked, I gradually felt fear in my heart. The cave was extremely large and spacious. It was at least as tall as 3 people. Even though there was a fishy smell, it was extremely dry. The deeper I walked, the dimmer the light became. After walking for around 50 steps, it became difficult to see anything clearly in the cave. I could only faintly feel that the deeper I went, the bigger the cave became. Just as I was hesitating about whether I should continue moving forward or not, I suddenly saw 2 balls of red light. They were the size of a human head, and they were filled with a terrifying aura. My blood seemed to have frozen at that moment. Before I could react, the 2 balls of red light suddenly moved, and a gust of evil wind rushed towards me. It was a powerful force that I couldn't resist at all. I only felt a pain on my neck before my entire body became numb. Immediately after, I lost all feeling. When a youth in black said that, his eyes were filled with fear. It was obvious that a few months had passed, but the terrifying scene was still deeply imprinted in the depths of his mind. When I woke up, I only felt that my entire body was very cold. My body was extremely weak, as though the blood in my body had been sucked dry. I originally thought that I was already dead, but after lying on the ground for a long time, I unexpectedly regained my strength and stood up. At that time, I only had one thought in my mind, and that was to quickly escape from this terrifying place. Thus, I ran out of the mountain and returned to the clan. It was an arduous process. I could feel that my body was very, very weak, especially when the sun shone on me. This feeling became even more obvious. Finally, after I escaped, I heard the laughter of my clansmen and fell asleep. This sleep lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. Hearing this, Chiyu had a rough idea of what had happened. Needless to say, this youth in black must have been attacked by some kind of ferocious beast. Fortunately, he didn't die, but his body was infected by some kind of BD, causing his body to mutate. It should be said that it was a genetic mutation. After a pause, the youth in black said, "When I woke up again, my body was still extremely weak. My body was still extremely weak, but I suddenly felt that everything around me had become much clearer than before. Even the speed at which my clansmen walked seemed to be slower than before. At that time, I didn't think much of it. After sleeping for so long, the first thing that came to my mind was naturally to eat something. Thus, I found some fruits to eat, and my body gradually regained some of its strength. However, I discovered that the originally delicious fruits had no taste in my mouth. When I came outside, I seemed to hate the sunlight even more. At this time, some of my clansmen returned from hunting, bringing back a lot of prey. Hunting and fruits have always been our main source of food. At that time, when I saw the blood on the prey, I don't know why, but the instant I saw the blood, my blood seemed to boil. I ran over impatiently, and with great difficulty, I got a prey and brought it back to my treehouse. At that time, my mind was filled with the desire for blood, and I didn't care about anything else. I actually bit the prey's body and sucked its blood. After that, I fell into a deep sleep. I don't know how much time had passed, but when I woke up from my sleep, the surroundings seemed to have changed. The feeling of weakness never returned, and my body was filled with strength. At the same time, I discovered that my body had also changed. The fangs, black fur, and the pair of wings had all appeared at that time. At that time, I was extremely afraid. I didn't know why I had become like this, and my heart was filled with fear. However, the feeling of being filled with strength was so real that I didn't know what to do. In the clan, I didn't have any good friends. Looking at the black fur on my body, I was afraid of being misunderstood by my clansmen, so I didn't dare to go out. Not long after, the changes on my body gradually disappeared, and I dared to walk out of my treehouse to face my clansmen. However, it was also from that day onwards that I lost interest in ordinary food, and only blood was what I desired. At the same time, I was gradually able to control the changes on my body. Apart from my dislike of sunlight, I discovered that my strength and speed had increased to an unprecedented level, and I could also fly in the sky with the wings on my back. To be honest, at that time, I even felt a little excited. However, I was afraid that my clansmen would find out that I liked to drink blood and reject me. Moonstar coldly snorted. "However, your changes were discovered by us. You've already become a demon, and you actually drink blood. An evil person like you must be punished. Otherwise, our clansmen will become your prey sooner or later. So, there's only one ending for you. The moon god won't forgive you." The black-clothed youth said in fear, No, I've never betrayed the moon god. Whenever night falls and the moonlight shines on the earth, I can feel that my strength is much stronger than during the day. The moon god didn't abandon me. Although I like to drink blood, I'm not an evil person. Moonstar, can't you accept my explanation? I've never wanted to harm my clansmen. I beg you, just give me a chance. Moonstar resolutely said, That's impossible. We definitely won't allow a blood-sucking demon to live among our clansmen. Let's go. We'll take you back and listen to the elder's judgment. The black-clothed youth's figure flashed, and he hid beside Chiyu. Great Emperor Huang, you have to help me. You just said that as long as my explanation is reasonable, you'll definitely help me, right? As he spoke, he was shocked to find that Chi Yu's expression was lifeless. Not only him, but the two beauties beside him also had very strange expressions. Taking a deep breath, Chi Yu looked at the black-clothed youth and solemnly asked, "Friend, tell me your name." The black-clothed youth was startled, and after a moment of hesitation, he said, I belong to the Dracula family in the Moon Clan. I'm an ordinary warrior of the Moon Clan. My name is Cain." "Duh, Kula," when Ting cried out involuntarily, and her gaze became even stranger. Chi Yu looked at the youth in front of him with his mouth wide open. He didn't expect that this clansman, who was regarded as a traitor and evil by the Moon Clan, actually had a name called Dracula. Dracula? Wasn't that the name of the direct descendant of the vampires? Cain seemed to be the ancestor of the vampires in the legends. How could this be? Could it be that the vampires, one of the powerful dark forces in the West, actually came from the Yanhuang land? The sudden discovery made Chi Yu and the other two unable to accept it. This was too ridiculous. The roots of the vampires in the West actually came from the East. Moreover, it was a human who shared the same ancestor as himself, and not an incarnation of a bat. At this time, Chi Yu had vaguely thought that the fierce beast that attacked Cain was most likely a bat-type fierce beast. After it absorbed Cain's blood, its own BD entered Cain's body and mutated, thus creating the first vampire in human history, who was also the ancestor of the vampires. Seeing that Chi Yu and the other two did not speak again, Cain couldn't help but feel anxious. "Your Majesty, the great Huang Emperor, I really have never done anything to betray my people. None of this is what I want. If I could, I would rather become the original cowardly and incompetent warrior of the lowest level. Please, I beg you, you have to help me." Looking at Cain with a complicated gaze, Chi Yu did not know what to do. If he killed Cain now, perhaps there would be no more vampires in this world. However, if he really did that, would he change the history of the entire world? If the Western Covenant of Darkness did not have the help of a powerful race like the vampires, how could it compete with the Vatican? The balance of the world might be broken. However, if he did not destroy him, then in this world, vampires would really be born. At this moment, his heart was filled with conflicting feelings. Frankly speaking, he didn't have much hatred for vampires. However, vampires belonged to the evil sequence, after all. Seeing one being born in front of his eyes, this feeling was too strange. Yu Xing and her people had already surrounded Cain from all sides. They raised the weapons in their hands, and as long as Cain tried to escape again, they would undoubtedly attack immediately. With a flash in his eyes, Chi Yu had already made a decision. Since it was destined that vampires would appear in this world, then even if he stopped the first Cain from appearing, perhaps the heavens would create the second ancestor of vampires. Instead of that, why should he interfere with the balance of history? Thinking of this, Chi Yu raised his hand and stopped Yu Xing and the others from advancing. He said, "Everyone, please listen to me. First of all, I want to know if you believe everything that Cain said." Yu Xing and her people looked at each other, nodded slowly, and said, "This is the only reasonable explanation. However, we, the Yu clan, are the purest race. We cannot allow evil people like him to exist. He must be punished by the Yu clan." Chi Yu smiled indifferently and said, "If that's the case, then you have no reason to punish him. First of all, Cain went out to look for giant beasts for a good purpose. He did this to make himself stronger and become a qualified Yu clan warrior. Everything that happened after that was out of his control. He did not want to see himself become like this. Therefore, although he does have an evil aura on him, it does not mean that he is evil. I don't know if you can understand what I'm saying." Yu Xing said stubbornly, "However, evil must be eradicated. Even if it is not his fault, we still cannot tolerate him." Chi Yu shook his head and said, "In my opinion, all the energy in this world is not really divided into good and evil. Every energy has its own special characteristics. Yes, the aura on Cain's body is indeed filled with evil, but no matter what kind of energy it is good when used righteously and evil when used. Using evil energy to do good things, is that not a good person? Using pure energy to do bad things, Is that not a bad person? Therefore, nothing in this world is absolute. I don't want you to reject him just because of the changes in his body. At least he should not be punished. Hearing Chi Yu's words, the surrounding Yu clan people fell into deep thought. Cain looked at Chi Yu gratefully and kept nodding his head vigorously. Tears rolled down his face, and he was choked with sobs. After a while, Yu Xing's expression seemed to soften a little. He said, "Although that is the case, we still cannot allow someone like Chi Yu to continue living among the Yu clan. As for how to deal with this problem, we still need to ask the great elder of our clan to decide. This is not something we can be sure of." Chi Yu nodded and said, "The matter has been clarified. In that case, please bring us to see the great elder." "Cain, don't worry. As long as you have not done anything evil, I will protect your life." Wen Ting's lips moved, and she sent a telepathic message to Chi Yu. "Do you really want to protect him? But if he really is the ancestor of that vampire, if we get rid of him now, we will have one less enemy in the future." Chi Yu chuckled. "No, you are wrong. First of all, I am not a gentleman, and I am not someone who is inflexible. Cain's appearance is actually not bad for us, the descendants of Yin and Huang. Even if he spread the vampires in history, it was only in the West, not in the East. Don't you want to see him create chaos in the West? Become an opponent of the Vatican? Since all this has already happened in history, why do we have to interfere with it? Moreover, in our era, the most powerful vampire was the vampire Prince Klinsman. Although he was an important member of the Covenant of Darkness, in some matters, he was much stronger than the hypocrites of the Vatican. So, I do not want to destroy the vampire system. Taking a step back, even without the history that we know, do you think Cain deserves to die now? He did not do anything wrong, and he did not willingly become like this. Do you have the heart to let the Yu clan execute him?" Chapter 148. Chi Yu nodded and said, "Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Cain's problem isn't hard to solve. I realize that it's not a bad thing that I have the identity of the heir to the Huang Emperor. At least, as long as I have this identity, the humans of this era will respect me." In essence, his identity as the heir to the Huang Emperor was not fake. The new owner of the Xianyuan sword and the Emperor's disciple could confirm his identity. Moonstar and the others were still very cautious of Cain. Moonstar led the way while the others formed a semicircle around Chi Yu's group and Cain. They walked into the depths of the forest. Cain stayed close to Chi Yu. The fear in his eyes was still there. It could be seen that this person was very timid. Chi Yu put a hand on his shoulder and said, "All right, don't be so afraid. I'm here." As he spoke, Chi Yu sent a gentle wave of natural energy into Cain's body to help him stabilize his chaotic breath. With the nourishment of Chi Yu's natural source of energy, the fear in Cain's eyes gradually disappeared. It turned into a somewhat intoxicated light. His slightly naked upper body also straightened up, and his breathing gradually became stable. As Chi Yu used the origin of nature to help him recover, he also sensed the changes in Cain's aura. As he probed deeper, he became more and more certain that this Yu clansman called Cain was the ancestor of vampires. The blood energy in his body was very similar to Klinsman's. Although it was far less powerful than Klinsman's, his blood energy was much purer than Klinsman's. As expected of the founder of the blood race, his blood was indeed the purest blood energy. The group of more than 10 people slowly walked forward. Fortunately, the place where they landed was not far from the Yu clan's headquarters. After walking for about an hour, the scenery in front of them suddenly changed. The smell of water became clear, and a wave of clear water rushed toward them, mixed with the fragrance of the earth and the smell of nature. Immediately, Chi Yu felt refreshed. When they passed through the last dense forest, Chi Yu and the other two were shocked by the scenery in front of them. In front of them was a lake with a wide surface and a circular shape. Through the visual test, Chi Yu estimated that the lake was about 1 kilometer in diameter. Although it was not very big, there was such a lake in the forest. It wasn't too small. Perhaps it was because of its existence that the forest could grow so well. The lake water was very clear. As far as the eye could see, it was all blue. If the sky during the era of the ancient beasts was a boundless sapphire, then the lake in front of him was like its child. It was equally clear and deep. The clear and cold lake water was so moving, especially under the cover of the surrounding giant trees that were more than 30 meters tall. This feeling became even clearer. At the same time, before entering the range of the lake, Chi had already discovered the difference between the Yu clan and other human races. They lived in tree houses. In this large forest, there were countless giant trees, and these trees all had very wide trunks. Through the ingenious design of the Yu clan, the branches in the giant canopy became the framework of their tree houses. With the help of some branches, leaves, and trees, they created a unique tree house. These tree houses were all in the canopy more than 20 meters above the ground. If one did not look carefully, it would be difficult to distinguish them. After all, the canopy was too dense. As they got closer to the lake, the number of Yu clansmen in the surroundings gradually increased. No wonder the Yu clansmen were so arrogant. Compared to the two clansmen, whether it was in terms of clothing or temperament, there was a world of difference. A gentle and noble Yu clansman was quietly doing his own thing. Even when he saw Cain being captured, he did not show too much surprise. Yuxing walked at the front. As she walked, she said to Qi Yu, "Among the four main human races, the Yu clan has the smallest population. We can only live in a primeval forest like this. This is the headquarters of the Yu clan. In order to fight against the Zhuli people, the warriors of our clan have already met up with the other three main human races under the leadership of the clan leader and the great shaman. Therefore, you won't see too many of our clansmen here. Our clansmen are the representatives of nobility. We believe in the moon goddess. Qi Yu, you are the heir of His Majesty Huang Emperor. However, what I don't understand is why His Majesty Huang Emperor chose the Earths and not the Yu clan. I think that the Yu clan is the most suitable home for powerful people like Huang Emperor and you." After hearing Yu Xing's words, Qi Yu vaguely understood that the Yu clan was probably the most difficult of the four main human races to deal with. They were a bit too arrogant. Although they had the right to be arrogant, if this continued, it would be difficult for them to integrate with other human races. It was no wonder that the Yu clan no longer existed in his era. Their way of life would be eliminated sooner or later. Of course, Qi Yu could only think this in his heart. He could not say it out loud. "Miss Yu Xing, the place where the Yu clan lives is indeed very beautiful. As for why Huang Emperor chose the Earths and not the Yu clan, I cannot answer you because I have never asked him. Perhaps it is because Huang Emperor was born into the Earths. Whether it is the Yu clan or the Earths, they are all a branch of the human race. No matter where Huang Emperor appears and where he returns to, he always wants to help the entire human race. Isn't that right?" Yu Xing glanced at Qi Yu and did not say anything. However, from her expression, Qi Yu could tell that she did not agree with what he had said. She clearly looked down on the Earths. "This lake is our lake of life. It is shaped like the moon, so we call it the Moon Lake. It is the lifeline of the Yu clan. Outsiders, even if they are also human, cannot come here without the permission of the chief. The Moon Lake is always so clear and beautiful. It is filled with a sacred aura, just like every Yu clan member. Of course, this does not include him." As she spoke, Yu Xing's gaze swept across Cain's face. Cain wanted to say something, but in the end, he held himself back under Yu Xing's cold gaze. Qi Yu sighed in his heart, although he did not say anything. His sense of identity with the Yu clan was gradually declining. He did not like the arrogance of the Yu clan members. As they spoke, they had already reached the shore of the Moon Lake. As they neared, they could see the clear water of the Moon Lake even more clearly. They could see the bottom of the Moon Lake through the blue water. At the bottom of the lake was a field of colorful pebbles. Under the illumination of the sun, the pebbles reflected a dazzling, colorful light, like pieces of gemstones. Cain suddenly muttered to himself in confusion. "Why do I not seem to be afraid of the sun anymore? The sun no longer seems to affect me. What is going on?" Thinking of the warm energy that Qi Yu's hands had given him, he looked at Qi Yu with a gaze full of gratitude. Qi Yu could not help but be stunned by his words. He thought to himself, no way. Could it be that the reason why high-level vampires were not afraid of the sun was because of him? This was too funny. Thinking of this, the expression on his face suddenly became a little strange. He wanted to laugh, but he could not. Yu Xing, who was at the side, only glanced at Cain and said to Chiyu, "Please wait here for a moment. Right now, the clan leader and the elders have led the warriors of the Yu clan to meet up with the other 3 human clans. The matters of the clan are decided by the young clan leader. I'll ask him to come out and deal with this matter." Chiyu nodded and said, "Then I'll have to trouble you." Although the main purpose of coming here was to take a bath, since they had encountered Cain's matter, they had to deal with it first. Yu Xing walked along the lakeside into the forest on the other side. This time, she actually made Chiyu and the other 2 wait for half an hour. Looking at the lake in front of them, Snow Girl and Wen Ting could not help it. Although they could not take a bath in front of everyone, the 2 girls still happily squatted by the lake and touched the cold and clear lake water. Their eyes were filled with the desire to jump in. Cain stood respectfully behind Chiyu and lowered his head without saying anything. Chiyu, on the other hand, fixed his gaze on the moon lake in front of him. His spiritual energy had already spread out into the surrounding forest. Through the influence of the spring of nature, he had obtained some information about the Yu clan from the old trees in the forest. The Yu clan was one of the branches of the human race. They had lived here for a very long time. The Yu clan did not break away from the other human races, but because of their arrogance, their relationship with the other races was not very harmonious. At least, there was one thing that the other races were very resistant to. The Yu clan absolutely did not allow their clansmen to marry other human races. It should be known that there were many handsome men and beautiful women in the Yu clan. This rule had caused a lot of resentment from the other races, especially the powerful high-level clansmen. Although they had proposed negotiations, the Yu clan did not buy it. They had always maintained their own tradition and refused to change. However, the Yu clan also had something that they were proud of. Aside from their appearance and temperament, the warriors of the Yu clan were much stronger than the other human races. They had lived in the forest since they were young and had many special abilities. Especially at night, their battle strength was very strong. In the previous battles against the Zuli people, the warriors of the Yu clan played a very important role. It was because of this that the Yu clan had always been able to maintain their position among the human races. After receiving this information, Chiyu could not help but think, if the Zuli people and the allied forces of the human races were destroyed, what would the Yu clan do? Would they stand on the opposite side of the other races? If that was really the case, with the power of the Yu clan alone, perhaps. Thinking of this, he could not help but feel a little sad. However, this was something that could not be helped. In this world, survival of the fittest had always been the survival of the fittest. Only the races that were more suited to this world would be able to survive better. If not, the final outcome would be destruction. Although the Zili people were strong, they were full of destructive characteristics, so they would definitely become the public enemy of the other humans. They would definitely head towards destruction. The Yu clan was so arrogant that they did not want to be on good terms with the other human races. When the huge threat that was the Zili people disappeared, their situation would probably not be the same as it was now. Half an hour passed. Even when Ting, who had a gentle personality, was starting to get impatient. Only then did Yu Xing walk out from the depths of the forest. With an apologetic expression, he quickly came before Chiyu and said, "I am truly sorry for making everyone wait. I know that you really hope that the clan can better deal with the problem of Cain, so I have reported his matter to the junior clan leader in detail. I am truly sorry for the delay. The junior clan leader will be coming out soon." Just as she said this, Chiyu suddenly felt a strong wave of energy. A low roar rang out, and a cool breeze immediately blew through the forest. This did not seem to be the power of nature, but was caused by a special kind of energy. At this moment, a huge white tiger slowly walked out from the forest that Yu Xing had come out from. Compared to a normal tiger, it was much stronger. It was about 1.5 meters tall and 4 meters long. Its huge head was held high. Its white tiger skin and black stripes made it look extremely powerful. There was not a single trace of impurity on its fur, and its tiger eyes were bright and full of expression. However, this white tiger could not attract Chiyu's attention. What surprised Chiyu was the young girl on the back of the white tiger. She was also dressed in white, but she looked very different from the other clansmen. Her fine black hair flowed behind her, fluttering in the wind. There was not a trace of blemish on her white and crystal-clear skin. Her face looked a little cold, and a pair of clear eyes emitted a faint light. She looked calmly at Chiyu and the other two. This was a beauty that was no less beautiful than Wenting. Even her temperament was somewhat similar to the Wenting that Chiyu had met for the first time. However, this girl in front of him was much colder than Wenting back then. Riding on the back of the white tiger, she looked a bit special and beautiful. After returning to Chiyu's side, surprisingly, this time Wenting was not jealous. Instead, she looked at the Yu beauty in front of her with admiration and whispered to Chiyu, "She is really beautiful. Beautiful without any flaws. This must be the junior clan leader of the Yu clan." Yu Xing said respectfully, "Yes, this is the junior clan leader of the Yu clan. At the same time, she is also the most beautiful human." The junior clan leader's name is Yu Yi. Yu Yi rode the white tiger slowly towards Chiyu and the other two. The white tiger's eyes were fixed on Chiyu. The powerful aura that Chiyu had felt earlier came from this tiger. With a faint smile, Chiyu's eyes revealed a faint glimmer. After a short moment of surprise, his expression had already returned to normal. As he smiled, he remembered what Yi Ruo had told him previously. The Yu clan's guardian divine beast was the white tiger. However, it shouldn't be the white tiger in front of him. Although the white tiger's energy wasn't weak, there was still a big gap between it and the black tortoise dragon river and the azure dragon golden eye that he had seen before. Very quickly, the white tiger stopped 3 meters away from Chiyu and the other two. Yu Yi, who was on the back of the white tiger, kept sizing up Chiyu. Her gaze was clearly a little disappointed. Evidently, she was not too interested in Chiyu's ordinary appearance. She said indifferently, "You are the successor of His Majesty Huang Emperor, Chiyu from the Tu clan." Looking at Yu Yi, who was still riding on the tiger's back, Chiyu could not help but feel a little disgusted. It was already a form of disrespect for her to talk to him while riding on the tiger's back. Even if he was not the successor of Huang Emperor, as a human from another clan, did she not know what was called etiquette? Chiyu's personality had always been one to respect others tenfold. However, if he met such a high and mighty person, he would not be polite either. If the other party was not a beauty, his expression would probably be even uglier. Smiling calmly, Chiyu said, "Isn't I also the successor of Huang Emperor? However, I am indeed Chiyu. Greetings, Miss Yu Yi of the Yu clan." Yu Yi looked up and down at Chiyu. She reached out and patted the white tiger's head, saying, "Is he real?" The white tiger's huge head moved. It stared fiercely at Chiyu and let out a low roar. Yu Yi nodded and said, "My white tiger said that you do not have the aura of a powerful being on you. Can you please explain?" Hearing Yu Ye's words, Chiyu was instantly enraged. This young clan leader of the Yu clan was too impolite. She actually asked the white tiger in front of her. She was still speaking to him in such a condescending manner. From the looks of it, if he was not the successor of Huang Emperor who possessed the Xianyuan sword, she would not be polite to him. Taking a step forward, Chiyu was already in front of the white tiger. The distance of 3 meters ended in that one step. He was only a foot away from the white tiger. He raised his right hand and snorted coldly. "Is this your attitude in front of a transcendent divine beast?" In the palm of his right hand, an intense silver light suddenly lit up. His originally completely restrained aura was released in an instant. He had already slapped the white tiger's forehead. As the saying goes, one must look at the master before beating a dog. Right now, Chiyu was beating the tiger to show its master. The light palm seemed to have no power at all. However, the moment Chiyu's simple palm slapped down, the white tiger immediately let out a sorrowful roar. Its huge body continuously retreated more than 10 steps. Its body prostrated on the ground, and its entire body was actually trembling slightly. Through this palm, Chiyu could sense the white tiger's abilities. It wasn't a divine protector white tiger, but merely possessed some of the divine protector beast bloodline. However, it wasn't pure and could only be considered a mid-level divine beast at best. Moreover, its cultivation would not exceed 3,000 years. Kiran's aura rose from Chiyu's body. Facing these ordinary humans, he did not need the Xianyuan sword at all. To them, Chiyu himself was already a supreme existence. Because of the white tiger's retreat, Yi, who was sitting on the white tiger's back, immediately turned pale. There was a hint of surprise in her eyes. She floated up and jumped off the white tiger's back. She landed on the white tiger's previous position, which happened to be about a meter away from Chiyu. As he stood on the ground, Chiyu realized that this Yu clan girl, who was known as the human's most beautiful woman, was actually more than one. 8 meters tall, she was only half a head shorter than him. Although she was wearing a long white dress, her proud figure could not be concealed. Her full and round breasts, her small and perky buttocks, and her long and slender legs were all captured by Chiyu's spiritual power the moment she landed on the ground. "Why did you hit it?" Yi glared at Chiyu angrily. It was obvious that she had a very deep relationship with the white tiger. Chiyu smiled faintly and said, "Every world has its own rules. It is the same in the world of almighty beasts. I did not hit it. I only told it that it should know what the rules are. If you don't believe me, you can ask it himself." Yi looked at her white tiger with some confusion. At this moment, the white tiger's huge body was completely prostrated on the ground. It was actually trembling slightly, and its huge head was lowered. It did not even dare to look at Chiyu again. This situation undoubtedly proved how strong Chiyu's body was. Chiyu smiled faintly and said, "Now, does Miss Yi still have any doubts?" Yi looked at Chiyu's ordinary appearance. Suddenly, she felt something she had never felt before from this earthly man who was half a head taller than her. That was power. As the princess of the Yu clan and the successor to the clan leader, this was the first time she had felt this way. In front of Chiyu, she found that her arrogance seemed so laughable. His deep eyes looked at her and actually made her panic. Was this the power of the successor to Emperor Huang? It was a pity that his appearance was a bit lacking, even worse than that of many of her clansmen. Otherwise, thinking of this, Yuya's pretty face could not help but blush. It seemed that she had added a bit of charm to her original elegance. Seeing this, Chiyu's heart could not help but soften. "You, are you really the successor to Emperor Huang? Then why have you come here?" Right now, the allied forces of the 4 races have gathered together. As the successor to Emperor Huang, you should be there. Yuya's voice was a bit gentler than before. Her beautiful voice, like that of an oriole leaving the valley, was very pleasant to listen to. Chiyu said faintly, "I'm sorry. I can't tell you why I've come here. I've never thought of confirming my identity with you guys. Coming here is actually just a coincidence. My wife and daughter want to take a bath here. At the same time, I've encountered the matter of Noble Cain. I hope you can properly solve it." When Chiyu mentioned his wife and daughter, Yuya's gaze could not help but shift to Wen Ting and Snow Girl. When she saw Wen Ting, she could not help but feel the same amazement as Wen Ting before. She was immediately shocked. In her opinion, since Chiyu was an aboriginal, then his wife should also be an aboriginal. However, from Wen Ting's fair and ruddy skin, there was no trace of an aboriginal at all. At the same time, her temperament and appearance were obviously not inferior to her own, especially her long dark red hair. Under the illumination of the sun, she was emitting a ruby-like radiance. She looked so alluring. Was this his wife? At this time, Yi had already recognized Chi-Yu's identity even more. After all, in her opinion, a person like Chi-Yu, who did not have an outstanding appearance, would not be able to get such a wife if he did not have powerful abilities. Thinking of this, she asked Wen Ting curiously, "You are not an aboriginal. Are you from the White Clan?" Other than the Yu clan, among all the human races, only the White Clan could produce such a beauty. Wen Ting shook her head and said with a smile, "I am the same as Chi-Yu. We are both aboriginal." She and Chi-Yu were telepathically connected. From Chi-Yu's previous behavior, she could naturally see that he was dissatisfied with the Yu clan in front of him. The surprise in Yu Ye's eyes became even stronger. She looked deeply at Wen Ting with some disbelief. Her gaze then swept across the ice-cold but outstanding appearance of Snow Girl. A strange feeling arose in her heart. Her original arrogance was greatly reduced in front of Wen Ting and Snow Girl, who were not inferior to her in terms of appearance. At the same time, she was also very curious. Chi did not look very old. How could he have such a big child? Bathing is not allowed. The water of our moon lake can only nourish our own Yu clan members. However, since you are the heir of Huang Emperor, I can make an exception and let your wife and daughter bathe. However, as for Kane's matter, please do not interfere. This is a matter of our own race. Even you, the heir of Huang Emperor, have no right to interfere. Hearing Yu Ye's words, a faint smile appeared on Chi Yu's face. Is that so? However, I have already promised Kane, and his explanation is very reasonable. I did not want to interfere with the internal affairs of the nobles, but I have to say that Kane should not die. Even if you cannot tolerate him, you should not harm him in any way. Yu Yi looked at Chi Yu, her gaze a little colder. She insisted, I have said before, this is a matter of our Yu clan. Outsiders have no right to interfere. Please do not interfere. Chi Yu smiled indifferently and shrugged his shoulders. All right then. I want to know, how are you going to deal with Kane? Yu Yi looked at Kane with a fierce gaze. She said coldly, there's only one ending for anyone with an evil aura, and that is destruction. Hearing Yu Yi say this, Kane, who had just calmed down, immediately fell to his knees with a thump. He begged bitterly, young leader, you cannot do this. Although I have not contributed much to the clan, I am still your clansman. You do not wish to become like this. I beg you, please forgive me. Chi Yu slowly walked to Kane's side and gave him a look with his back facing Yu Yi. He said indifferently, young leader Yu Yi is right. All evil should be expelled. Since you insist on having your head chopped off, I will not stop you. It seems that the Yu clan will not be satisfied until he is killed. Yu Yi nodded firmly. That is right. The rules of the clan cannot be violated. Chi Yu said indifferently, all right then. Since you want to kill him, you do not wish for the evil aura on his body to pollute this pure land. Let me do it for you. As he spoke, Chi Yu's hand had already slapped Kane's head as fast as lightning. Kane did not even have time to react before he was completely swallowed by a colorful light. No! Just as Ye's voice came out, Kane's body had already disappeared. Chi Yu looked indifferently at Yu Yi and said, young leader, did you not want to kill him? I will help you and save you from polluting this holy land. This seems to be the best outcome. Although Yu Yi could not sense Chi Yu's true intentions, she understood that everything in front of her was not right. However, Kane had already disappeared, and she did not know where he had gone. What else could she say? She glared at Chi Yu. You still interfered with the internal affairs of the Yu clan. Chi Yu smiled slightly and said, no, this is not interference. I just want to help you. Young leader, do you know that we can go take a bath now? It seems that you do not really welcome our arrival. Don't worry. After bathing, we will immediately leave the Yu clan's territory. Yu Yi looked at Chi Yu. Her breathing was clearly somewhat unstable. Her eyes flickered for a moment, but in the end, she did not blame Chi Yu. She called over a Yu clan girl and gave her a few instructions, asking her to take Chi Yu and the other two to take a bath. Chi Yu and the other two left with the Yu clan girl. Yu Xing came to Yu Ye's side impatiently and said in a low voice, young leader, we did not do this very well, did we? Although Huang Emperor is of the Tu clan, he is also the leader of the entire human race. And since this person called Chi Yu is the heir of Huang Emperor, if you treat him so rudely, will he treat the Yu clan in the future? Yu Yi snorted coldly and said, did you not see his attitude? The Yu clan is the noblest clan of the human race. Even if we do not receive the help of Huang Emperor, so what? We have the best forest, the most beautiful moon lake, and the strongest warriors. We do not need to fear anything at all. Every time we fight against the Jiuli people, isn't it always the Yu clan warriors who charge at the forefront? Although this person called Chi Yu feels very strong, he does not look like Huang Emperor at all. There is nothing worthy of respect about him at all. All right, this matter is settled. After they finished bathing, send them away from here. There is no need to report to me. Chapter 149. After washing away the dust on their bodies, Chi-Yu and the other two immediately felt relaxed. It turned out that the Moon Lake was not the only source of water for the Yu clan. Within the forest, there were many hot springs of various sizes. The Yu clan girl had brought them to two adjacent hot springs for a bath. Chi-Yu had originally wanted to peek at Wen-Ting's alluring figure, but considering that Snow Girl was there, he had to give up on this dirty idea. However, soaking in a hot spring was indeed an enjoyable thing. After bathing, the three did not tarry in the Yu clan. They did not have much of a good impression of the Yu clan. After bidding farewell to the girl who had brought them to the hot spring, they immediately took to the air and flew towards their destination. After flying for about 10 kilometers, Chi-Yu controlled his speed to slow down. He rubbed the Kirin orb on his chest, and a black shadow flashed. Kane suddenly appeared in front of the three. As soon as he appeared, Kane was shocked by a situation in midair. Fortunately, his reaction was not slow. He immediately transformed into a vampire and used his wings to stabilize his body. Chi-Yu smiled faintly and said, "All right, I did not break my promise to you. This place is safe. You should have seen that no matter how you explain, the Yu clan will not accept you. If that is the case, there is no need for you to stay there." Only now did Kane completely understand that Chi-Yu had said that he wanted to kill him in order to save him. His eyes immediately filled with gratitude as he respectfully said, "Many thanks to your Majesty Yellow Emperor for saving me. Kane will never dare to forget this in this lifetime." Chi-Yu smiled and said, "No need to thank me. What are your plans?" Hearing Chi-Yu's words, Kane's gaze became blank. He muttered, "Plans? I don't know where to go. Since the day I was born, I have been living in the Yu clan. Now that I can't go home, where should I go? If the Yu clan can't tolerate me, I'm afraid the other human clans won't tolerate me either. This world is full of danger. If I meet a giant beast again, I'm afraid my life will end." At this point, his eyes suddenly lit up. He looked at Chi-Yu and said, "Your Majesty Emperor Huang, why don't you let me follow you? As long as you don't mind, I'm willing to become your servant and serve you forever." Ah, Chi was shocked by him. Making the ancestor of the vampires his servant? The corners of his mouth curled into a smile as he shook his head. "No, that won't do. In my eyes, everyone is equal. At most, we are friends. How can I let you become one of my clansmen? I still have a lot of things to do, and they're all very dangerous things. I can't bring you with me, otherwise you will definitely encounter danger." Kane looked at Chi-Yu dejectedly and smiled bitterly. "Yes, I'm a person with evil powers. How can you accept me?" Chi-Yu frowned slightly and said, "No, I've never thought that way. Kane, you should understand that if I saw you that way, I wouldn't have saved you at all." Kane's pale face immediately changed. He lowered his head and said, "I'm sorry, Your Majesty Emperor Huang. I didn't mean it that way. It's just that I really don't know what to do now. Please let me follow you. Even if I have to pay the price with my life, I'm willing. After all, you saved my life. Being able to live one more day is worth it." Chi said, "No, you still have a long life. Perhaps you don't know this, but although your body's mutation has brought you a lot of trouble, you already have a long life that far surpasses that of humans. Because you can't be accepted by humans, you're no longer suitable to live in the Yanhuang land. Why don't you go to another place? There are no giant beasts there, only ordinary humans. Perhaps, after you go there, your situation will be completely different." "Another place? Where is that?" Kane asked blankly. Chi smiled bitterly in his heart. He was pointing the way for the ancestors of the vampires. It turned out that the appearance of the vampires in the West was actually instigated by him. But since history was like this, so be it. It's the West. Our Yanhuang land is in the east of this world. On the other side, there are many continents in the West. Why don't you try your luck there? When you get there, I think you can have a brand new life. After leaving this place, you can head towards the direction of the sea. When you find enough food, you can take it out to sea. If you want to head towards the West, it might take a long time. But as long as you can reach the West, then you will have a new life." Kane's gaze still looked very blank, but Chi-Yu's words had brought him hope. He let out a long sigh and smiled bitterly. I never thought that my fate would become like this. No matter what, Your Majesty Emperor Huang, I have to thank you for your kindness today. If I have a chance to return in the future, I will definitely repay you. Chiyu shook his head and said, There's no need to repay me. However, Cain, can you give me a little of your blood? Your current situation has a lot to do with your blood. I want some of your blood to study it carefully. Cain was stunned, but he still nodded his head. Chiyu took out a small porcelain bottle from the Kirin bead and handed it to Cain. He extracted some of Cain's blood through his wrist meridian and stored it. The amount was not large, so it would not affect Cain's body at all. After exhorting Cain about some problems and going out to sea, they finally separated. Chiyu knew that although a person would face great danger by going out to sea rashly, Cain's fate would inevitably allow him to reach the western continent safely. At that time, the dark world in the west would gradually appear. As for these things, they should continue with the development of history. He naturally had a purpose for wanting Cain's blood. Cain was the ancestor of the vampires. Su Qing, who possessed the purest origin blood of the blood race, had already become a vampire. If she could get Cain's blood, who knew what she would become? At least, it would definitely be a great tonic for her. After storing Cain's blood, Chiyu and the other two set out on the road to Kunlun Mountain again. At this moment, when Ting's expression suddenly changed, she pulled Chiyu's hand and said, Something's wrong. Look over there. Why does it seem like there's a fire? At this time, they had not yet flown out of the area covered by the forest. Looking in the direction that when Ting was pointing, Chiyu suddenly found that the forest they had passed through before was now burning with raging flames, and it seemed to be in the direction of the Moon Lake. After receiving the news that Chiyu and the other two had left, Yi couldn't help but snort coldly. She muttered to herself, It's good that they left. This so-called successor of Emperor Huang is only SOSO. At this time, he's not even with the allied forces of the four races. Instead, he came here. At this moment, the white tiger, who had been lying beside her, suddenly stood up. Its fierce eyes looked in one direction, and all the hair on its body stood up. It let out a low roar. Yi was stunned and said, Little White, what's wrong? Did you discover something? As the white tiger let out a low roar, the gaze in its eyes changed. From the initial vigilance, it gradually turned into ferocity and then into fear. This process was completely seen by Yu Yi. Suddenly, the white tiger fiercely pounced on Yu Yi. It lowered its huge head and lifted Yu Yi onto its back. It turned around and jumped down from the treehouse, running into the distance. Little White, what are you doing? Let me down quickly. Yu Yi was not weak herself, but there was still a gap between her and the white tiger. At this moment, the white tiger's body was emitting a surging aura of energy, completely restraining her body behind its back. It ran almost crazily in one direction, as if it had discovered the most terrifying thing. At this time, the Moon Clan's territory had already undergone a huge change. Dozens of huge figures gradually appeared in this territory, filled with an evil aura. They covered the sky and covered the earth. Giant beasts with incomparably large bodies, as if they were crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, caused a devastating blow to the forest. Some of them spat fire, some spat venom. Almost in an instant, a large part of the forest on the east side of the Moon Lake had fallen, and these ferocious beasts had already pounced on the Moon Clan people below. Yi clearly saw this scene in front of her and was immediately deeply shocked. She saw that the monster in the lead was emitting a strong black light, and its tall body floated in the air. Its face was covered by the black light, and its appearance was clearly that of a human. There were also 3 people behind it, all of whom looked very handsome, but slightly older. At this moment, they were standing respectfully behind it, while the huge beasts below were madly destroying the Yu Clan's territory around the Moon Lake. The entire Yu Clan's homeland was gradually turned into ashes under their enormous energy. Raging flames soared into the sky, and everything around them was quickly disappearing. The Yu Clan's warriors could not even resist. Under the enormous energy, they were either eaten or turned into minced meat. The entire Yu clan was overturned after these huge beasts appeared, and it had only been a few minutes. After a short moment of sluggishness, tears immediately covered Yu Ye's pretty face. "Let me down, little white, let me down. I want to live and die with my clan. Let me down. That is my home, and it has been destroyed by them. How can I explain this to my mother?" Seeing a large number of her clansmen being rapidly destroyed by the beast's attacks, her heart ached as if it was being cut by a knife. She had never seen this scene before. The Yu clan's princess, who had been pampered since she was young, was now on the verge of collapse from fear. The bull demon king floated in the air and looked at the masterpiece of his beasts with satisfaction. He said coldly, "Kill them all. Don't leave a single one alive." "Humph, the humans actually want to unite? Very well, I will let you lose your home. Let's see how you will fight against the Jili people. Haven't the divine beasts been very active recently? I will let them see what true destruction is." The Chaos King said flatteringly, "Of course, how can those divine beasts compare to the wise and brilliant you? Your wisdom is as boundless as the vast ocean." Ever since the last time they fought with Chi Yu and witnessed the ferocious Beast King's true power, these three supreme experts of the ferocious beast world became even more loyal to the Bull Demon King. They did not even dare to think about obtaining the throne of the ferocious Beast King from the hands of the Bull Demon King. After all, the ferocious Beast King was just too powerful. In these 2 short months, the ferocious Beast King had completely recovered from the light injuries he had suffered that day. At the same time, he had also discovered that the Xianyuan sword in Iruo's hand was fake. Initially, the Bull Demon King was prepared to lead the ferocious beasts to destroy the headquarters of the Earth Tribe before finding trouble with the divine beasts. However, at this moment, the Jili people's attack on the White Tribe was suddenly annihilated. The few ferocious beasts that had luckily escaped told him about the discovery of the real Xianyuan sword. This discovery made the Bull Demon King wary and temporarily gave up on the idea of destroying the headquarters of the Earth Tribe. After all, there's not only one Kirin there. There was also Chi Yu, the ink Kirin of the 4 auspicious clouds. After obtaining the real Xianyuan sword, although the Bull Demon King was not worried about the rise of the divine beasts, he was still a little fearful of the Xianyuan sword, which was ranked second among the 10 great artifacts. Therefore, he changed his strategy. After contacting the Jili people, he decided to help the Jili people destroy the humans first and gradually invade this world. At the same time, the appearance of a Xianyuan sword also made him extremely vigilant. He also began to search for the divine artifacts. The Bull Demon King was confident that as long as he could obtain a divine artifact, he would definitely become the absolute ruler of this world. The 10 great artifacts did not reject ferocious beasts. For example, the Xianyuan sword was the sword of the king and could not be controlled by ferocious beasts. As for the Devil Refining Gourd, they could not touch it either. Apart from these 2, among the other divine artifacts, only the Nuwa stone could be used by humans who represented justice. The rest could be obtained by anyone based on luck and ability. The Bull Demon King sent some low-level ferocious beasts to support the Jili people's gradual frontal attack on the humans. At the same time, he sent his powerful subordinates to search for the whereabouts of the divine weapon. Recently, he had received some news, so he brought the 3 kings of the ferocious beasts and some low-level ferocious beast subordinates to the west. When they passed by the Yu clan's territory, with his personality, he did not want to attack. However, when he thought of cooperating with the Jili people to attack the humans and restrain the divine beasts, he put down his pride and ordered his subordinates to attack freely. The Yu clan's headquarters was completely destroyed in an instant under the tyrannical attack of these ferocious beasts that were at least 6,000 years old. There were originally more than 100,000 Yu clan members living in the Yu clan's headquarters. However, at this time, all the Yu clan warriors had left, leaving behind only 30 to 40,000 elderly and children. There was not even a single powerful warrior with a ferocious beast as a companion. How could they possibly fight against these powerful, ferocious beasts? Fresh blood dyed the soil of the forest red. The flames had already devoured everything here. After all, The rulers of the ancient ferocious beasts were still the ferocious beasts. Tens of thousands of lives and large tracts of forest had been completely devoured by dozens of ferocious beasts in the short span of a few minutes. The only one who could escape was Yi. She had only escaped this disaster with the help of the white tiger's sharp reflexes. Yi's vision had already become blurry. Everything in front of her seemed to have become illusory. The monstrous screams continuously surged into her ears like waves. Although she had escaped, her body and mind had suffered a huge blow. Looking at the monstrous flames gradually moving away, she could not even cry now. The white tiger's senses were indeed very sharp. As soon as it discovered the powerful aura of the ferocious beasts, it immediately made the fastest choice. At that time, the Yu clan could no longer escape. It could only bring its human companions and leave as quickly as possible. At this time, it was running desperately. In its heart, it thought of the Kirin aura that Yu had emitted not long ago. In the hearts of all divine beasts, Kirin was supreme and the commander of all divine beasts. It ran in the direction that Yu and the others had left from the Yu clan girl. Now, it only hoped that those ferocious beasts would not discover it. Otherwise, the final result would only be destruction. The king of ferocious beasts, the bull demon king, floated quietly in the air. Did he not notice Yi's escape? How is that possible? With his strength, when he first arrived here, his mental strength had already enveloped the Yu clan's territory. The white tiger carried Yi and ran as fast as it could, but it could not escape the grasp of his mental strength. However, in his eyes, Yi was less than an ant, so he did not pay much attention to it. It was still a game of cat and mouse. At this time, he was thinking the same. Great Pung, there's a kitten running in that direction with a Yu clan member. Send one of your subordinates to finish them off. The bull demon king felt that the white tiger was about to run out of the range of his mental strength, so he instructed the great Pung wisdom king. Among these ferocious beasts, in terms of flying speed, the great Pung wisdom king's bloodline was naturally the fastest. In the bull demon king's opinion, the white tiger that had escaped could be easily dealt with by a superior ferocious beast like the golden Pung eagle. Yes, my king. After the great Pung wisdom king responded, he let out a sharp cry. Suddenly, a golden Pung eagle with a cultivation of around 6,000 years rose into the air. It flapped its golden wings and came to the great Pung wisdom king's side. The great Pung wisdom king pointed in the direction indicated by the king of ferocious beasts and said a few words. The golden Pung eagle's eyes suddenly showed a bloodthirsty excitement. It spread its huge wings and turned into a golden light as it flew out. The bull demon king very much enjoyed controlling his mental strength around the moon lake. Every time the Yu clan member let out a scream, he would feel a bit of pleasure in his heart. Killing was his nature, and destruction was his favorite. At this moment, he was completely immersed in the beautiful slaughter in front of him. He could also imagine the expressions of the mythological beasts when they found out that the Yu clan headquarters had been destroyed and that tens of thousands of Yu clan members had been killed. The white tiger released the energy in its body without reservation. It really used all of its strength. It couldn't be more familiar with this big forest. While running at high speed, it could always cleverly avoid those huge trees. While running, it also had to use its own energy to protect the sad Yi. At this moment, Yi was completely stunned by the excessive sadness. Even her body's instinctive reaction had been lost. If it wasn't for the white tiger protecting her, she would have already fallen down. The white tiger didn't know how far it had run. The energy within its body was rapidly being consumed, but it didn't dare to stop. When a moment of destruction arrived, it could clearly feel how powerful the incoming enemies were. Not only was it unable to resist them, even the most powerful lineup of the divine beasts might not be able to deal with them. Now was the moment of life and death. It knew that the further it was from that place, the more likely it would be to survive. Therefore, it could only not be stingy with its energy as it madly ran in one direction, hoping that those ferocious beasts didn't sense its aura. However, no matter how fast the white tiger ran, could it catch up with the ferocious beasts flying in the sky? The answer was definitely no, especially since the one chasing it was the golden-winged eagle, a superior ferocious beast that was known for its flying speed. The white tiger's heart immediately sank as it sensed the energy aura. It could clearly feel that the huge crisis was rapidly approaching it. As the crisis got closer and closer, it had already determined the opponent that was chasing it. Its running gradually slowed down. It knew that it could no longer escape. The white tiger panted violently, and its mouth continuously dripped from its innermost part. It didn't have much physical strength left after running for its life. At this moment, the fear in its huge tiger's eyes had completely disappeared. Since it couldn't run, it could only use this last bit of time to recover as much energy as possible and fight to the death with its opponent. The white tiger desperately absorbed the energy molecules in the air as it put the sorrowful Yu down. Its huge head kept rubbing against Yu's body as it let out a low growl, calling for Yu. Under the white tiger's continuous efforts, Yu finally woke up from her daze. Looking at the huge tiger head in front of her, she knew that the white tiger had saved her life. After staring at it for a short while, Yu burst into tears. The screams of her clansmen continued to echo in her ears. Although she didn't want to believe it, she knew in her heart that her clansmen had no hope of survival. This was the first time she had seen so many ferocious beasts suddenly appear. The strength of these ferocious beasts was also something she had never seen before. She knew that her home was finished. It had been completely destroyed by the ferocious beast attacks, and her clansmen probably wouldn't be able to escape from the ferocious beast's clutches. Yu hugged the white tiger's huge head and burst into tears. Xiaobai, what should we do? My clansmen, the white tiger's calm gaze carried a hint of affection. It looked at Yu as if it was looking at its own child. It let out a few low growls, as if it was comforting Yu's heart. Yu suddenly raised her head. What did you say? You want me to leave? No, I won't leave. I definitely won't leave you alone. The white tiger let out another roar. However, this time, its roar was filled with dignity. Its eyes were filled with anxiety, and its huge head kept rubbing against Yu's shoulder. I understand. The enemy is so strong, but my clansmen are already dead. Not to mention the fact that I might not be able to escape from those ferocious beasts. Even if I can escape, so what? Tens of thousands of my clansmen have already died. How can I explain this to my mother? Xiaobai, since I was very young, you have always been protecting me. In my heart, you are no different from my father. I will never abandon you and escape alone. If we are to die, let us die together. As soon as Yi finished speaking, a fierce gust of wind came from the sky. The leaves parted, and a golden light flashed. The 30-meter-tall forest was instantly cut down from about 10 meters. The huge figure of the golden-winged roc had already appeared in the white tiger's and Yu's eyes. At this moment, it brought with it an absolutely terrifying aura. The white tiger let out a sorrowful roar. Upper level against middle level, 3,000 years of cultivation against 6,000 years of cultivation. There was no need for a battle. The result was already very obvious. The huge gap could not be made up for. Now, Yu had already lost her last chance. The white tiger was even more clear that even if it fought to the death, it would not be able to stop the golden-winged roc for too long. It looked deeply at Yu, and its eyes were already filled with sorrow. It knew that it and Yu were probably really going to die here. Knowing that it was going to die, the white tiger lost its fear. It raised its head and let out a strong roar towards the sky. The sound waves rolled, threatening the golden-winged roc in the sky. Would the golden-winged roc be afraid of the white tiger? Of course not. It was an upper-level ferocious beast, and it had 6,000 years of cultivation. Facing such a white tiger, its heart was filled with disdain. It flapped its huge wings fiercely as if it was showing off. Immediately, two huge golden lights floated out, and another part of the forest was destroyed by its tyrannical energy. The light in the golden-winged roc's eyes was filled with mockery. It was as if in its eyes, the white tiger and Yi were already dead people and dead tigers. A huge energy aura enveloped the forest in front of it from above. It was not in a hurry to attack. Looking at its opponent that was far weaker than it, the golden-winged rock's heart was filled with evil thoughts. Although it could not transform into a human, it had extremely high intelligence. In its heart, it was thinking about how to torture Yu Yi and the white tiger in front of it to be the most satisfying. However, at this moment, the white tiger took the initiative to attack. The white tiger's huge body suddenly leaped up from the ground. Its front claws grabbed onto the big tree in front of it, and it flew up again, instantly closing the distance between it and the golden-winged rock. It opened its mouth wide, and with a furious roar, a white energy ball was immediately shot towards the golden-winged rock in the sky. At the same time, an aura that was unafraid of death erupted from its body. A cloud of blood mist actually erupted from all the white fur on its body, and it mixed with its own energy and condensed around its body. The golden-winged rock flapped its wings, and two rays of golden light intersected in the air like a huge golden scissors, instantly shredding the energy ball that the white tiger had spat out. However, its gaze was no longer as calm and disdainful as before. It looked at the blood mist that was still continuously emitting from the white tiger's body, and it immediately became nervous. The white tiger was indeed going all out. It used its own blood essence as a medium to completely stimulate its own potential. Any giant beast knew this method, but very few of them used it because this was an attack that would result in certain death. Although it could increase its combat power by several times in a short period of time, it would be due to overexerting its own potential and releasing its blood essence. Once its energy was exhausted, it would definitely die. However, at this moment, the white tiger could no longer care so much. In order to protect Yu Yi, it would fight to the death with the golden-winged rock even if it died. The golden-winged rock clearly did not want to fight head-on with the white tiger. In a situation where its strength was completely superior to its opponents, there was no need for it to take the risk. Hence, it flapped its huge wings violently, causing its body to rise rapidly into the air. Once the white tiger used up most of the energy in its blood essence, it would no longer have any ability to resist. However, the golden-winged rock had clearly underestimated the white tiger's ability and determination. The white tiger watched as its body rose into the air and suddenly opened its mouth to spit out an arrow of blood. In an instant, the blood mist that was emitting condensed energy around its body was instantly sucked out by the blood mist, turning into a blood-red energy that chased after the golden-winged rock in the air like a bolt of lightning. The golden-winged rock was suddenly shocked. It was already impossible for it to dodge. The white tiger's desperate attack had completely locked onto its body with its spiritual power. Helpless, it could only circulate its energy with all its might and open its mouth to spit out its NEI pill. The golden-winged rock's energy was injected into the golden NEI pill, turning it into a sturdy shield that met the white tiger's attack. With a loud bang, blood splattered everywhere, and the aura of energy immediately filled the surroundings where the two ancient beasts were fighting. The trees below that had been touched by the blood all had terrifying, penetrating wounds. The blood light almost caused the surrounding light to change. Although it was only for an instant, the horrifying aura still filled the area between the two parties. After all, the golden-winged rock strength was much higher than the white tiger's, and the NEI pill was the condensation of its energy essence. Under its full power, although the white tiger's life-risking attack was shockingly powerful, it only caused the golden-winged rock to spit out a mouthful of blood. The light of the NEI pill seemed to have dimmed a lot, and it did not have any real killing effect. Chapter 150. Little White. Yi pounced on it. Tears flowed from her beautiful eyes once again. White Tiger was like this because of her. At this moment, Yu Yi hated herself. If she had not chased Chi Yu and the other two away so quickly when they arrived, perhaps everything would have been different. Perhaps Little White would not have become like this. White Tiger had already turned into a blood tiger. His mouth was wide open as he gasped for breath. His pair of tiger eyes that were originally brimming with vigor had now become a lot dimmer. He looked at Yu Yi apologetically. as if he was remorseful for not being able to protect her. Little White, don't scare me. I beg you, don't scare me. You can't die. You've always been by my side since I was young. If you die, I'll definitely die with you. Yuye's voice was as mournful as a cuckoo crying blood. She could clearly feel that White Tiger's life force was slowly draining away. The pressure from the golden-winged rock reappeared. It had been injured by White Tiger's desperate attack. At this moment, it was already extremely angry. It no longer considered how to torture and kill the person and tiger below. Now, its heart was filled with thoughts of destruction. Yi raised her head and roared in a mournful voice. Kill me. Kill me too. Even if I die, I want to die with Little White. A look of disdain appeared in the golden-winged eagle's eyes once again. It slowly spread its huge wings in the air. With its strength, it could destroy Yu Yi in an instant. It abruptly retracted its wings and abruptly pounced towards Yu Yi. At this moment, a surge of fiery red energy suddenly appeared out of nowhere in the golden-winged rock's path. The surging flames immediately caused the golden-winged rock to pause. Then a huge wave of energy descended from the sky and instantly condensed on its body. It was purple energy. In almost an instant, dozens of lightning bolts accurately struck its back. With the golden-winged rock's abilities, it would not be easy for it to launch a sneak attack on him. However, the White Tiger had already injured him quite severely. Furthermore, his heart was filled with resentment and anger, causing him to ignore the energy aura around him. It was shocked when it was suddenly intercepted by the fire attribute energy. Then, the lightning in the sky had already descended. All the energy in its body leaked out in an instant. The golden-winged eagle only felt that its body had been completely paralyzed. The strong impact of the energy caused it to spit out a mouthful of blood. At this moment, it was no longer able to control the energy in its body. It could only rely on spreading its wings to control its body so that it wouldn't fall. However, at this moment, a black light that seemed to have come from the depths of hell descended from the sky in a beautiful arc. The golden-winged eagle couldn't move. It could only watch as the black light descended towards its body. Within the black light, it saw a silver pattern. It seemed to be an image, and the black light seemed to be circular. This was all he could see. The black light reflected a faint energy aura under the sunlight. The black shadow passed through the golden-winged rock's neck and rose again just as it was about to reach the ground. It floated up into the air. As the light flashed, blood splattered. The golden-winged rock did not even have time to use the NEI pill before its head was separated from its body. Its huge body fell heavily to the ground with a dull thud. Its head landed very close to Yu Yi, causing her to scream. 3 figures descended from the sky and landed beside Yu Yi. The black light from before had already merged with the figure in the middle, and V floated onto his forearm. The ones who had arrived were Chi Yu and the other 2 who had rushed back after discovering the change in the Yu clan. Not only had they discovered the change in the Yu clan, but Chi Yu had also clearly sensed the aura of the Bull Demon King. He hesitated for a moment before rushing over with Wen Ting and the Snow Girl. The Bull Demon King was too powerful. This time, no one could save them. Hence, Chi Yu hesitated whether to return. When he felt the aura of a large number of ferocious beasts, he knew that the Yu clan was finished. This was not something that he could change alone. However, he still returned because he did not know why the Bull Demon King had led the ferocious beasts here. Was it just to destroy the Yu clan's headquarters? If that was the case, then there was no need for him, the king of ferocious beasts, to personally come here. Any one of the Chaos King and the other king of ferocious beasts was enough to destroy the entire Yu clan. Hence, he still sneaked back with Wen Ting and the Snow Girl. The closer he was, the clearer he could feel with his spiritual power. From afar, Chi Yu saw the golden rock in the air. He was not in a hurry to go over. Although the golden rock in front of him was not too strong, and he could deal with it, Chi Yu was afraid that the golden rock would attract the Bull Demon King's ferocious beasts. If the Bull Demon King discovered that the 3 of them were here, they would not even have a chance to escape. Hence, Chi Yu did not attack immediately. When he arrived nearby, He just happened to see the white tiger launch a desperate attack and collide with the golden rock. Seeing that the white tiger had no strength to resist and the golden rock pounced towards Yi below, Qiyu knew that his chance had come. With his clever control of the thundercloud force and the thundercloud force, he easily fixed the golden rock body in mid-air when the golden rock was careless. The Kirin mirror left his hand and turned into a circular sharp blade, beheading the golden rock in front of it. It did not even have time to send out a distress signal. With a flash of light, Qiyu directly activated the Devour skill, continuously absorbing the golden rock's energy into his own body, filtering it, and converting it into his own energy. Wen Ting and Snow Girl came to Yu Ye's side and supported her swaying body. Yu Yi, who had thought that she was going to die, was suddenly saved. She was on the verge of a mental breakdown. Looking at Qiyu descending from the sky, it was as if she had found her savior. She actually broke free from Wen Ting and Snow Girl's support and fell to her knees. "I beg you, Your Majesty Huang Emperor, please save Little White. As long as you can save him, no matter what you want, as long as I have it, I will give it to you." Seeing her like this, Qiyu couldn't help but feel a little ironic in his heart. The Yu clan's princess, who had been high and mighty before, was now kneeling on the ground and begging him. Sighing inwardly, he had already arrived at the white tiger's side. He raised his hand and pressed on the king character on the tiger's head, pouring thundercloud force into the white tiger's body. The white tiger had used up all of its blood essence, and its life force was rapidly flowing out of its body. Seeing Qiyu, its huge tiger eyes were filled with a pleading light. Qiyu sighed and said, "I understand. Don't worry, I will take good care of him. You are indeed worthy of being one of the mythological beasts, worthy of having the guardian mythological beast White Tiger's bloodline. Your actions have already proven everything. You are a hero among the mythological beasts." The white tiger's gaze gradually softened, and it let out a low roar. Looking at Qiyu, its eyes actually revealed satisfaction. "How is it? Can Little White still be saved?" Yi rushed over and asked. Looking at Qiyu, her eyes were full of pleading. Qiyu gently shook his head and said, "It's very difficult. It has used up all of its potential to stimulate energy that doesn't belong to it. Even its blood essence was completely used up in that attack. Now that its body has collapsed, it's too difficult to save it. It's not impossible. I beg you, please save it. I've never begged anyone in my life. As long as you save Xiaobai, I'm willing to be your slave." Qiyu indifferently said, "I don't dare to have such an arrogant slave like you." As he spoke, he began to increase the input of thundercloud force into the white tiger's body and gradually withdrew the other 3 types of thundercloud force. He only used the pure water thundercloud force to nourish the white tiger's meridians and condensed the little remaining blood essence to try to restore the white tiger's body functions. Yu looked at Qiyu, and her eyes became a little dull. She suddenly looked at Qiyu carefully, and big drops of tears fell from her eyes. "Master, from now on, I will work hard for you. As long as you can save Little White, I am willing to do anything. I beg you, Master." As she spoke, she actually kowtowed to Qiyu. Qiyu frowned and gave Wen Ting a look. "Pull her away. We have to leave this place quickly. Otherwise, if Demon Bull and the other beasts discover the changes here, none of us will be able to leave." Wen Ting came over and pulled Yi up. Yuye's power could not compete with hers. Her eyes revealed a look of fear. "No, we can't abandon Little White. I'd rather die than let it stay here by itself. It became like this because of me." "Shut up," Qiyu shouted impatiently. "I don't need you to tell me what to do. V has no time to treat it here. We have to go to a safe place first." As he spoke, the water thundercloud force he released suddenly strengthened, completely enveloping the white tiger's body. Kirin's marrow cleansing and tendon changing technique was fully activated, and it began to treat the white tiger's injuries. However, the white tiger's main problem was not its injuries, but the loss of essence blood and overexploitation of its potential. It was just like when Qiyu used Kirin's arm. However, its attack naturally could not compare to Qiyu's ultimate Kirin's arm. With a flash of light, Chiyu put the white tiger back into his Kirin's pearl. Although the white tiger's life was still in danger, Kirin's marrow, cleansing, and tendon-changing technique had at least stabilized its injuries. It would not die for the time being. With a serious expression on his face, Chiyu floated forward and wrapped his arms around Wenting's waist. He called out to the snow girl and immediately rose into the air. However, this time he did not fly high, but flew quickly forward in the forest, sticking close to the treetops. At the same time, he used his mental strength to completely envelop the aura of the four of them. In order not to leave a trace of the Bull Demon King and the others, Chiyu directly activated the art of Thousand Transformation technique of Jade Pearl. He used the energy of his breath to completely protect the four of them and doubled the speed of his flight. Although this increase in speed would consume a lot of his thundercloud force, it was the best choice at this time. Consuming some thundercloud force was much better than facing the Bull Demon King. As soon as they flew, Yi fainted in Wenting's arms. From a moment, the ferocious beasts entered the Yu clan and started a massacre, until she was finally rescued by Chiyu. It had only been about half an hour. However, in this half an hour, she had experienced the destruction of her home, the murder of her clansmen, and the serious injury and death of her closest friend. As a girl who had not seen much of the outside world, her spirit had reached the limit of what she could bear. As Chiyu flew, he used the art of Thousand Transformation technique of Jade Pearl to increase his mental strength. He sensed if there were any pursuers behind him. Under his careful control, he changed several directions and quickly escaped into the distance. By the time the great Rock Wisdom King realized that his subordinates had not returned after a long time and found the corpse of the golden-winged eagle, Chiyu was already hundreds of miles away with the three girls. The effect of the art of Thousand Transformation technique of Jade Pearl became more and more important as Chiyu's energy increased. With its help, Chiyu could better display his abilities. It was also because of this ability that he was able to fully conceal the aura of Chiyu and the other three girls and did not leave any traces for the ferocious beasts. After flying completely out of the forest, Chiyu raised his body into the air. He used the art of Thousand Transformation technique of Jade Pearl to simulate a white cloud and quickly flew in the direction of the Kunlun Mountains. At this moment, the nervousness in his heart relaxed a little. At this speed, the possibility of the Bull Demon King catching up to them was very small. After all, he would also fly 90,000 miles. With the help of the art of Thousand Transformation technique of Jade Pearl, even the speed of the Great Rock Wisdom King might not be able to catch up. Feeling that Chiyu's energy was constantly weakening, Wenting said with concern, "Let's go down and rest for a while." If they were chasing, they would have caught up long ago. Chiyu nodded and glanced at Yu Yi, who was in Wenting's arms. He smiled bitterly and said, "We brought this trouble with us. Sai, perhaps I shouldn't have brought you back to that place at all." Wenting smiled and said, "All right, it's already like this. I'm afraid the Yu clan has already been destroyed. Although this Yu clan princess is a little arrogant, she is also quite pitiful. Her clansmen have been killed and her home destroyed. She is already pitiful enough. When she wakes up, don't scare her anymore." "That's right, father. She's a girl. Can't you give in to her a little?" Snow Girl pouted at Chiyu. Chiyu looked at her with some surprise and said, "Don't tell me you also have a good impression of her? How come I don't think there's anything about this Yu clan princess that's worth having a good impression of? She is indeed pitiful now, but a girl like her will suffer sooner or later. A person can't be without pride, but they can't be arrogant." Snow Girl lowered her head, her eyes slightly red as she said, "I don't have a good impression of her. I just sympathize with her. I've experienced the same thing before. Perhaps this is what it means to be in the same boat." Chiyu looked deeply at Snow Girl. He knew that now was not the time to ask about Snow Girl's past. He sighed and said, "Silly girl, as I said, as long as we can return safely, I will definitely avenge you." After exiting the forest, they passed through a narrow plain and crossed a river. Finally, they found a small hill that was suitable for hiding and stopped. Chiyu first used his mental power to explore the surrounding thousands of square kilometers. When he did not find any powerful beasts, he blasted out his Kirin arm and directly opened up a wide cave at the bottom of the hill. The four of them then entered. Chi did not look at Yu Ye's situation. Instead, he could not wait to summon the huge body of the white tiger from the Kirin Pearl. At this time, the white tiger's eyes were already closed. If it was not for the sound of breathing, it would be almost impossible to feel the breath of life from its body. Chi Yu frowned. Its life is getting weaker and weaker. It seems that I can only use the energy of the origin of nature to save its life. This white tiger's loyalty makes it fully qualified to be nourished by the origin of nature. As he spoke, Chi did not dare to be negligent. He laid the white tiger's body flat. Regardless of the consumption of his thundercloud force, he took a deep breath and gently moved his palms less than an inch away from the white tiger's body. Under his deliberate action, a faint green light gradually appeared. This was not the origin of nature that Chi Yu had summoned, but his own origin of nature. The faint green light, with a huge breath of life, slowly flowed into the white tiger's body. At this time, the white tiger's injuries had been healed by Kirin's marrow and muscle washing and changing technique. What it needed now was vitality. Only by awakening its vitality could it be reborn. In order to allow the white tiger to survive, Chi Yu urged the origin of nature in his body into the white tiger's body. At the same time, he divided his attention and continued to insert his water thundercloud force into the white tiger's bones. Through Kirin's marrow and muscle washing and changing technique, he stimulated the white tiger's hematopoietic function and restored its body. Yu did not know how long she had been unconscious. When she woke up, she only felt that her whole body was sore and weak. She could not use any strength. After a while, she gradually adapted to the dim light around her. When her pupils refocused, the first thing she saw was the white tiger, whose entire body was wrapped in a green light. She cried out in surprise and was about to pounce on it when she was pulled back by Wenting. If you want your giant beast companion to live, don't do anything now. Don't disturb Chi Yu, understand? Wenting comforted Yu Yi softly. Yu Yi looked at Wenting in a daze. She choked with sobs and said, Can he really cure Little White? Wenting smiled and said, Don't worry. With Chi Yu's personality, he won't waste his energy if your white tiger can't be saved. I think you must have a way to help your white tiger regain its vitality. Yu Yi nodded, her eyes filled with anticipation. However, tears continued to flow down her pretty face. The white tiger's life seemed to be saved, but the tens of thousands of clansmen were all ready. When she thought of that scene, her heart was filled with extreme sorrow. The Yu clan's territory, which had been passed down for thousands of years, had been destroyed just like that. The Moon Lake was dyed red with blood, and everything was turned into ashes by the cruel flames. Yu Ye's body began to tremble. She wanted to feel pain, but she was afraid of disturbing Chi Yu. She threw herself into Wenting's arms, her delicate body constantly convulsing. The intense pain constantly stimulated her heart. Wenting patted Yu Ye's shoulder and sighed softly. She comforted her in a gentle voice. It's over. It's over. Don't think about those cruel things anymore. Relax. Since it's already happened, there's no point in feeling more pain. What you should do now is to stabilize your emotions and deal with the aftermath of this matter. Do you understand? Yu Yi looked at Wenting mournfully. She lowered her voice and said, Deal with the aftermath? What else is there to deal with? Everything is over. Apart from me, I'm afraid none of my clansmen will be able to survive. Our territory has been destroyed. Thousands of years of accumulation has turned into ashes. Our Moon Lake has been destroyed. Those vicious beasts are so savage. Tens of thousands of lives have been lost. They've completely disappeared. Wenting sighed and said, The weak are prey to the strong. This is an inevitable rule of this era. Miss Yu Yi, don't be sad. Relax. After all, you still have other clansmen. Everything will be fine. The destroyed territory can still be rebuilt. As for the dead, you can still find a way to avenge them. Yu Yi clenched his fists tightly. That's right, I want revenge. I want revenge for my clansmen. Even if I have to sacrifice my soul to the devil. I want to obtain the power to kill those beasts. Looking at Yu Ye's resentful eyes, Wen Ting couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. However, she really didn't know what to say to comfort her. At the very least, it was better to let her have some hope for revenge than to continue being sad. Chi Yu's treatment of the white tiger had already come to an end. In the past, when he used nature energy to affect Iruo, Emohua, and the other divine beasts, he had only used the aura of the origin of nature to affect their own aura when he was cultivating. However, this time, he was afraid that he would attract the attention of the ferocious beasts when he was absorbing the nature energy. Thus, he completely relied on his own energy to help the white tiger recover its vitality. In addition, he also had to use Kieran's marrow washing and tendon changing technique at the same time. This was a huge burden on his body. At this moment, his face was dripping with sweat. It seemed that it was very strenuous for him. Snow Girl observed the situation outside the cave entrance. From time to time, she would look back at Chi Yu, who was inside the cave, with a little worry in her eyes. The green light instantly shone brightly, and then completely converged into the white tiger's body. Chi Yu let out a long breath and slowly withdrew the thundercloud force and nature energy that he had released. Although he had consumed a lot of them, he felt relieved after the treatment was completed. The white tiger's huge body moved a little, and its eyes opened again. Although there was still no spirit in them, the grayish-white color from before had disappeared. Yu Yi cheered and quickly pounced on the white tiger, hugging its big head tightly. "Great, little white, you finally came back to life. This is really great." The white tiger raised one of its tiger paws and patted Yu Ye's back. Its big head rubbed her shoulder, and its tiger eyes were full of tenderness. From time to time, it would look at Chi Yu, full of gratitude. Chi Yu had given it a complete new life. Chi Yu stood up tiredly and said, "I've already healed his injuries, and I've also helped him completely recover his vitality. He's even stronger than before. However, his cultivation all these years has been completely lost due to overexploitation of his potential. Although his life is not in danger, if he wants to recover to his previous level, he will have to rely on his own hard work." Only now did Yu Yi realize that it was Chi Yu who had saved the white tiger. She turned her head and looked at him with tears in her eyes. She nodded gratefully and said, "As long as I can save Little White's life, I'm already very satisfied. Little White, even if you're just an ordinary tiger, you'll always be my best friend." The white tiger nodded at Chi Yu and let out a low roar. Although it had lost all of its energy, its heart was filled with joy at this moment. Without energy, it could cultivate again. However, not only had Chi Yu healed its injuries, but during the process of treatment, Chi Yu's huge and pure natural energy had completely transformed its body. Although it had lost its energy now, its body had already undergone a mutation. It had turned from a mid-level divine beast to a high-level divine beast. Although it had to cultivate again, its future development potential was much greater than before. Chi Yu knew that the white tiger was thanking him. He faintly smiled and said, "This is the reward you deserve. You didn't hesitate to sacrifice your life for your companion. This is already enough to make me admire you. You should first recover your strength and then cultivate diligently. I believe that you'll definitely become a powerful divine beast." After saying that, Chi Yu walked to Wen Ting's side and sat down. Wen Ting gently wiped the sweat on his forehead with her sleeve. Chi Yu touched Wen Ting's small hand and said with a faint smile, "I'm going to start cultivating. Once the thundercloud force recovers, we'll leave this place." "Master." Yu Yi suddenly stood up from the white tiger's side. She quickly walked to Chi Yu and knelt down. Chi Yu frowned slightly and said, "I've said it before. I didn't save the white tiger because of you. You don't need to call me master. No, we of the Yu clan will never go back on our words. You saved Little White, so you're my master from now on. No matter what you ask me to do, I'll definitely obey." Yu Ye's eyes were very resolute. As she spoke, she had already knelt down in front of Chi Yu. Looking at Yu Yi, Chi Yu's disgust towards her lessened a bit. After all, he felt a bit of pity towards this Yu clan girl who had already lost her home and clansmen. He sighed and said, "You don't need to be like this. You and the white tiger can leave now." I don't need you as a slave, and I've never wanted to enslave anyone. Go find your clansmen and tell them about the destruction of your home. Tell them about the destruction of your home. Now, I can't help you anymore. Yi stubbornly shook her head and said, No, you're my master. This will never change. Master, if you don't want me, I'd rather die in front of you and return my life to you. Chi didn't expect Yi to be so unyielding. He said with slight anger, Is your life so worthless? What's the point of dying for nothing? Don't you want to avenge your clansmen? Are you going to let it go just like that? Yi was taken aback. But if you don't let me fulfill my promise, even if I continue to live, I won't have the face to see anyone. I can't see my clansmen now. When my mother left, she gave me the territory. But now that the territory has been destroyed, how can I face her? Right now, I have no home to return to. I can only follow you. Please accept me. Chiyu coldly snorted and said, Are you no longer as arrogant as before? If I say that I want your body now, will you give it to me? Yuya's body trembled. She bit her lower lip with her pearly white teeth. Looking at Chiyu's burning gaze, her eyes revealed a hint of hesitation. She subconsciously took 2 steps back. Chiyu smiled indifferently and said, You can go. Yuyi suddenly shook her head and said, No, I won't go. Fine, if you want it, I'll give it to you. As she spoke, she actually raised her hand and began to take off her clothes. Chiyu was startled. He thought that with Yu Ye's arrogance, she would definitely fling her sleeves and leave when he proposed such a despicable condition. He didn't expect her to have such determination. Under his provocation, she actually offered her body. He hurriedly said, No need, I don't want it now. As he spoke, he secretly glanced at Wenting and found that Wenting was also looking at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. Kneeling down once again, Yi said, Then please accept me, master. No matter what difficulties we encounter, no matter what dangers we face, I am willing to follow you, serve you, and be your slave. Chi thought to himself, Didn't I just find a big trouble? Although it was exciting for such a beauty to say that she wanted to be his slave, the Beast King and the others were not far from here. Bringing her along would definitely be a burden. Moreover, he was going to search for the Kunlun mirrors. He didn't know what kind of danger he would encounter. If he brought such a girl along, he would definitely have to be responsible for her safety, which would distract him. Just as he was about to refuse again, when Ting said, Chiyu, let her stay first. This is the wilderness, and the white tiger has lost its ability. Where can you let them go? Chiyu glanced at Wenting and could only nod helplessly. He said, All right, you can stay for now. However, you are not my slave, and I have never agreed to it. You didn't force Chiyu to accept her as a slave. She hurriedly said respectfully, Thank you, master. Master, can I learn some skills from you? I want to use my own strength to take revenge. Hearing her say this, Chiyu suddenly realized that this Yu Yi wasn't without schemes. She said that she wanted to be his slave because he had saved her and the white tiger's lives. At the same time, didn't she also see his ability? Chapter 151. Yu Yi stared blankly at Chiyu, and the light in her eyes blurred. Her enemy was actually the most powerful being in the world. How was she going to take revenge? Even the person in front of her, who she thought was very strong, was no match for him. Was there any hope for revenge? Chiyu used a day's time to restore his body to peak condition. Before leaving the cave, he first went out alone to carefully investigate the surrounding environment and aura. After confirming that there was no aura of the ferocious Beast King, he then summoned the 3 girls. He had not thought of a way to solve Yi's problem. Wenting was right. The ancient beast age was very dangerous. Leaving her alone was equivalent to leaving her to fend for herself. Since he had saved her, how could he watch her die? Therefore, he could only bring the number 1 beauty of the human race with him for now. As for White Tiger, Chiyu directly kept it in his Kirin Pearl and let it cultivate on its own. Being able to borrow the Kirin aura of the Kirin Pearl was very beneficial to White Tiger's cultivation. It was also very happy to do so. The 4 of them resumed their journey. Chiyu took out a map to determine the direction and flew in the direction of Kunlun Mountains. He already had a plan in his mind. Even if everything went smoothly and he obtained the Kunlun mirrors, he still had to help the divine beasts with that matter. When that time came, he would send Yi to the Yu clan. As for what trouble he would encounter when looking for the Kunlun mirrors, it was meaningless to think too much about it now. While Chi Yu and the other three were on their way, on the other side, the beasts that had completely destroyed the Yu clan's territory were also undergoing changes. Hundun, I have a mission for you. Bring 10 6,000-year fierce beasts to the Julie tribe to assist them, as long as you don't encounter a large number of divine beasts. As long as you don't encounter a large number of divine beasts, you will help them destroy as many humans as possible. Bull Demon King ordered the Chaos King coldly. Yes, great king. King, are those humans really worthy of our attention? As you can see, those tens of thousands of people were destroyed by us in an instant. No matter how strong their reproduction ability is, as long as we want to destroy them, we can completely do it easily. I think we should deal with those divine beasts first. The king of beasts, Bull Demon King, glanced coldly at the Chaos King. Do I need you to judge what I do? Although humans were weak, they were not to be underestimated. Back then, even I had to be wary of Emperor Huang, who possessed the Xianyuan sword. Never underestimate humans. Not only did they reproduce very quickly, moreover, it was also developing very quickly. Although they are still far from being a match for us, it does not mean that they will never become stronger. This could be seen from how much the mythological beasts valued humans. All of you better learn to be smarter in the future. Even if there is only a small possibility, we cannot allow any race to threaten our dominance. When the King of Chaos saw that the Bull Demon King was showing signs of anger, he hurriedly said in fear, "Yes, great king, your wisdom is far beyond my reach. Only with your great foresight can you lead us to become the ruler of this world forever. I'll go right away." After saying that, he immediately flew down, randomly chose 10 ferocious beasts, and left. Seeing that the Chaos King had left, the Bull Demon King said to the Great Rock King and the Deep Sea Nether Dragon King, "Both of you have to pay more attention to him. Don't be fooled by his respectful attitude towards me. But the Chaos Clan is different from us other beasts. They are born to devour. If he becomes strong enough one day, there is no guarantee that he won't devour all of us. Therefore, all of you have to be more careful with the Chaos King. All right, bring the other clansmen and leave this place now. Return to our territory and keep an eye on the movements of the mythological beasts. I have something to do. Before I return, even if the mythological beasts launch a large-scale attack, all of you must not act rashly. At the same time, all of you have to find out the whereabouts of the human with the Xianyuan sword. Keep an eye on his movements at all times. According to the reports from our people, I think that the Xianyuan sword might have fallen into the hands of that Enkiran. If that's the case, it will be a huge threat to us. The mythological beasts have been suppressed by us for thousands of years. We must not give them any chance to make a comeback. With the previous experience of the Chaos King being rebuffed, the Great Rock King and the Deep Sea Nether Dragon King didn't dare to ask any more questions. After acknowledging respectfully, they led the rest of the beasts away. Looking at their departing backs, the Bull Demon King's body swayed and shrunk to the size of an ordinary human. Then, he flew into the air and headed towards the west. Chiyu lowered his head and looked at the annotations and locations on the map. He mumbled to himself, "Behind the Crimson Water and before the Black Water, there is a huge mountain named the Kunlun Hill. It is 10,000 miles wide and 1,000 miles tall. It is the birthplace of the mythological beasts and the gathering place of the saints and immortals. According to the legends, the Kunlun Hill seems to be the place where the gods gather. It should be here." After 5 days of flying, a large yellowish-brown river appeared in front of them. Chiyu knew that if the map was right, this should be the so-called pond water. However, the description on the map seemed to be a little exaggerated. It was 10,000 miles wide, but 1,000 miles tall was indeed impossible. It was a pity that there were no more saints or immortals. Now that they were close to the Kunlun Hill, Chiyu's desire to obtain the Kunlun mirrors became even more urgent. Looking at the other side of the Crimson Water, there was a snowy mountain that stretched for thousands of miles behind the Crimson Water. It looked majestic and towering. The bottom of the snowy mountain was no different from an ordinary mountain. However, halfway up the mountain, it was completely covered in pure white snow. Chiyu had seen snowy mountains when he went to Yunnan before. However, the snowy mountains in Dali paled in comparison to the majestic Kunlun Hill in front of him. Chiyu said to Wenting, "You guys find a safe place here and wait for me. I will go to the Kunlun Hill to search." Wenting frowned and said, "How can you do that? I am worried about you going alone. I want to go with you. I am of the fire attribute. Even if it is cold in the mountain, it will not affect me." Snow Girl said, "I am of the ice attribute. Naturally, I am not afraid of the cold. Dad, no matter what danger there is, it is better for us to face it as a family than you face it alone. Moreover, in the snowy mountain, my senses will become more acute. Maybe I can help you find the place where the Kunlun mirrors are." Upon hearing the Snow Lady's words, Chiyu couldn't help but be moved. The one who discovered the green phosphorus splitting tree lizard was Snow Girl. Her perception of energy was indeed not weaker than his. Especially in the world of ice and snow or plants, her spiritual power and spiritual sense would become more sensitive. After being nourished by his origin of nature, her ability would definitely be stronger than before. She would be a good helper. And when Ting's strength had already made great progress. Although she did not have as many magic treasures as he did, her overall energy, she should not be any worse than him. Chiyu's gaze fell on Yu Yi and said, "Yu Yi, you don't have to go with us. The weather in the snowy mountain is bad. You will not be able to endure it." Yu Yi was taken aback and said, "No, I want to go with you. Master, with your protection, why would I be afraid of the bad weather? I am no longer the princess of a Yu clan. I am now your slave. No matter where you go, I will go." In the past few days, although Chiyu did not agree to take her as a slave, Yu Yi still insisted on calling Chiyu by his name. Of course, it was only limited to Chiyu. The arrogance on her body seemed to have disappeared. Not only did she take the initiative to go out to find water for Chiyu and the other two to drink, she would also pick fruits and serve Chiyu as much as possible. This caused Chiyu's impression of her to change. Chiyu frowned. "How can this be? We're not going to play. The danger is great, and it is no less than the vicious beast that attacked your Yu clan last time. Do you understand?" Yu Yi bit her lips and said, "No matter what, I must follow you. If you don't agree, after you leave, I will think of a way to cross the river to find you." Seeing the resolute light in her beautiful eyes, Chiyu could not help but feel a headache. Although he no longer had the bad feelings towards Yu Yi, she was still too weak. They were about to start looking for the Kunlun mirrors. Could he really bring her along? When Ting said, "Forget it, just bring her along. I will not be at ease leaving Lady Yu Yi here. Although this is the westernmost part of the Yanhuang territory, it is hard to guarantee that there are no vicious beasts. Moreover, without us by her side, just living here will be very difficult for her. If there is any danger, you can first put her into the Kirin Pearl. Won't the problem be solved?" Yu Yi looked gratefully at Wenting and said, "Master, I will definitely not cause you any trouble." Chiyu thought to himself, "You are already a huge problem." He nodded helplessly and said, "All right then. But after entering the mountains, no matter what happens, you must listen to us. You are not allowed to act on your own." Yu Yi nodded meekly and walked to Wenting's side. "I will." Chiyu activated his thundercloud force and enveloped the three women. He floated up and flew towards the Kunlun mountain range behind the Crimson River. Although the Crimson River was wide, it only took a short moment to cross it by flying. When they truly arrived at the Kunlun mountain range, although they were flying, Chiyu could still clearly feel how majestic this mountain range was. As the altitude increased, the air here became a lot thinner, and a cold feeling constantly assaulted them. Wenting had no choice but to circulate her fire attribute energy to protect herself and Yu Yi. In this environment, Snow Girl was like a fish in water. She happily flew beside Chiyu, feeling the ice and snow energy, her eyes filled with an intoxicated light. After entering the Kunlun mountain range, Chiyu first flew towards the south. The map showed that the location of the Kunlun mirrors was in the Kunlun mountain range, but as for the specific location, they would have to find it themselves. Chiyu knew that the only thing he could rely on now was his spiritual power. Therefore, he decided to first search from the side of the Kunlun mountain range. Although it was a little troublesome, a carpet search was undoubtedly the best choice. At least his spiritual power covered an area. This way, after determining a certain range, it would be easier to find the specific location. In order to make the judgment of his spiritual power more accurate, Chiyu controlled the range of his spiritual power to about 100 miles. This way, he could more clearly feel any changes in energy within the range of his spiritual power. In this hypoxic and cold environment, the thundercloud force was consumed very quickly. After they entered the Kunlun mountain range for a whole day, Chiyu's search had only covered 1/10 of the entire Kunlun mountain range. Since they were already here, Chiyu was not in a hurry. When the cold wind gradually became bitingly cold and the sun slowly set in the west, he decided to stop the search and find a place to rest for the time being. The Kunlun mountain range was really too big. When they landed on the snowy mountain from the sky, it was almost impossible to tell where they were. The sky was getting darker and darker. Chiyu carefully controlled the four of them to land on the south side of the snowy mountain. It was windy from the northwest here, so the south side was relatively windy. However, this time, he did not use Kirin energy to blast a hole. This was a snowy mountain, and he did not want to cause an avalanche. Although he could not blast it, Chiyu still had his own way. To deal with ice and snow, fire was obviously the best choice. The faint fire thundercloud force melted the eternal ice that had been condensed for many years. After a while, a hole that could only fit one person had appeared in front of them. The ice on the snowy mountain was very thick. Chiyu melted to a depth of about 3 meters, but there was still no sign of contact with the mountain. He first went into the hole alone, and then used the fire thundercloud force to expand the space inside. This way, the hole would be smaller, and the inside would be warmer. When he expanded the hole to about 3 square meters, he called the 3 of them down. Although it was difficult for Yu Yi to survive in this kind of climate with her strength, with the help of Wen-Ting, the cold could not affect her. However, the altitude sickness still made her very uncomfortable. As soon as she entered the ice hole, she began to gasp for breath, and her pretty face looked a little blue. If it was not for the fact that the physical fitness of humans in this era was far better than that of Chiyu, she was afraid that she would not have been able to hold on. After going through intense grief, Yi had now become a little sluggish. Her originally beautiful big eyes had lost their original spirit. Her physical discomfort could not free her from the torture of grief. The death of her clansmen and the destruction of her territory were constantly torturing her. With the help of the sunlight outside, they could clearly see the crystal-clear ice in the cave. Although it was frozen, the temperature was obviously higher than outside. Wen-Ting and the Snow Girl sat on either side of Yu Yi. Wen-Ting used her own energy to provide heat, while the Snow Girl held Yu Ye's hand and looked at her with concern. Her eyes were full of sympathy. At this time, Chiyu's mind was focused on the search for the Kunlun mirrors. After a day of searching with his mental power, they had already flown over a small part of the Kunlun mountain range. However, he still did not feel any special aura. This made him a little worried. Although he did not doubt the information provided by the mythical Beast King Moa, if he still could not find the whereabouts of the Kunlun mirrors after searching the entire Kunlun mountain range, then it would be very troublesome. After all, searching with his mental power was the only way he could think of. This mountain range was so vast, if he could not find it with his mental power, he could not possibly dig 3 feet into the ground. At this time, he would rather face the predicament that he had in Xuanyuan's tomb than be unable to find the exact location of the Kunlun mirrors. The feeling of having power but nowhere to use was the most painful. Chiyu, give her some food. Her body is getting weaker and weaker. Wen-Ting's words woke Chiyu up from his contemplation. His gaze fell on Yu Yi. Looking at his sluggish appearance, Chiyu could not help but feel a little pity in his heart. Before they set off, he had prepared a large amount of fruits so that he could eat them while searching for the Kunlun mirrors. The Kirin pearl on his chest shone, and more than 10 fresh fruits appeared in front of him. Chi Yu first handed them to one Ting and Snow Girl, then took a few fruits and gave them to Yu Yi. Eat some. Yu Yi looked at Chi Yu blankly and shook her head gently. Chi Yu frowned. Can you take revenge by not eating? It's impossible for the dead to come back to life. But if you, the living, are still like this, I'm afraid the dead won't be able to rest easy either. You are the Yu clan's princess. Even if it's for your dead clansmen, you have to take care of yourself. I often say that in this world, nothing is impossible. Those beasts are indeed powerful, but you can only have the chance to take revenge if you are alive. Otherwise, everything is just empty talk. Hearing Chi Yu's words, Yu Ye's eyes brightened. She said mournfully, I am no longer the Yu clan's princess. I am not worthy. If Mother was in the territory, perhaps she would have discovered the beasts earlier, and our clansmen would not have died so miserably. Yu Yi shook her head blankly. Chi Yu's eyes shone sharply, and an invisible pressure immediately enveloped Yu Ye's body. What you need to do now is to protect yourself and use all methods to increase your strength. Only then will the possibility of your revenge gradually increase. Yu Ye's mouth twitched bitterly. Train hard? What use is that? I am just a human. Even if I work hard, what can I do? In the end, I'm still not a match for those beasts. Chi Yu said coldly, What about Huang Emperor? Is he not human? Back then, he was able to use his own strength to lead the humans to defeat the Julie people, causing the humans to be where they are today. Is he a god? We are both human. Why can't you do what he can? Why can't you have the strength that he can? Let's take a step back. Let's not talk about Huang Emperor. Let's talk about myself. Do you think that I was able to obtain the strength that I have today and gain the recognition of the Xianyuan sword because of luck? All opportunities are always left for those who are prepared. Someone like you who only knows how to lament and blame yourself will never become a strong person, let alone take revenge. Yu Yi looked at Chi Yu with a strange gaze, as if she had just met him for the first time. She muttered to herself, Opportunities are always left for those who are prepared. This sentence is very profound. Master, I understand. As she spoke, she took the fruit from Chi Yu's hands and took a hard bite. Chi Yu smiled and nodded at Yu Yi. That's right. Protect your own life first, then talk about other things. Yu Yi ate the fruit as her gaze gradually became determined. Master, can you teach me your ability? I want to become stronger. I want to become strong like you said and avenge my clansmen. A hint of hesitation appeared in Chi Yu's eyes as he said, It's not that I don't want to teach you, but it's not suitable for you to learn my ability. At the same time, it's very likely that we will have to leave this place and go to a faraway place. That is a place that you can't follow. However, if you're willing to learn, I can recommend a powerful divine beast to teach you the ability that you can cultivate. Yu Ye's eyes, which had just seen some hope, immediately dimmed. She lowered her head and said, Master, are you still angry with me? It was my fault at that time. I shouldn't have treated you like that. It was because of my pride that you left. Otherwise, perhaps with you around, we could have saved a few more of our clansmen. Chi Yu shook his head and said, That's right. I admit that I hate your pride. However, there is one thing that you must be clear about. At that time, even if we were there, it would be impossible for us to help your clansmen escape from their suffering. This is because I am far from being a match for the Beast King. What I said to you just now was not to beat around the bush. What I said was the truth. It's just that I can't explain it to you two clearly. As the Yu clan's princess, you should have some ability. Although I can't teach you my ability, I am willing to help you with your own ability. Perhaps it will have some effect. Yu Yi once again raised her head to look at Chi Yu. From Chi Yu's eyes, she saw sincerity. Her heart dimmed a little as she said, My ability is still very weak. It is still far from being comparable to my mother. The reason why the Yu clan is stronger than other human clans is mainly because we are the children of nature. Under the moon goddess's care, we possess the power of nature. Not only does it give us the ability to fight, it also allows us to live 20 years longer than normal humans. Chi Yu's heart stirred, and he said, The power of nature? Can you show it to me now? If the Yu clan has the power of nature, we will have an advantage against the Jili people. Yu Yi said sadly, Advantage? We originally thought that we were proud of having the power of nature, but ever since I saw the destructive attacks of the beast that day, I no longer think that the power of nature is that strong. In front of those beasts, my clansmen didn't even have the chance to use their power. Chiyu said, "You don't have to be so discouraged. In the face of absolute power, any ability is very difficult to resist. However, if your power of nature can be as strong as that of the beasts, then that might not necessarily be the case. Come, show me your power of nature. Perhaps I can be of some help to you." If Yi had cultivated other abilities in the past, perhaps Chiyu wouldn't be of much help to her. However, if it was the power of nature, it would be a completely different story. After absorbing the energy of the reincarnation fruit, Chiyu had become a true origin of nature. Although he didn't have the opportunity to fully cultivate his body of nature, as an origin of nature that possessed the purest power of nature, he was absolutely confident that he could be of great help to Yu Yi in this aspect. Under Chi Yu's encouragement, Yu Yi nodded gently. She picked up an uneaten fruit and held it in her hands. The light in her eyes froze, and as she took a deep breath, her originally blue skin regained its rosy color. A faint energy aura emanated from her body, and a gentle green light appeared between her palms. Although the light was very weak, it was indeed the power of nature. It was the same power of nature as Chi-Yu, the origin of nature. The faint light revolved around the fruit. It looked very gentle, but the way it operated was also very strange. Through his mental strength, Chi-Yu carefully sensed the way Yu Yi operated the power of nature. He couldn't help but be secretly surprised. It was an extremely special operation method. During the operation, the power of nature underwent certain changes. The energy molecules were constantly being damaged and fused. At the same time, the power of nature wasn't just a vortex as it seemed on the surface. Instead, it was formed by countless small vortexes. Each vortex had a different speed, and they constantly merged into the fruit. Chi-Yu discovered that the rotating power of nature seemed to be imitating something in the fruit. After a while, the fruit began to change. First, the fruit itself expanded. It was originally only the size of an egg, but it gradually expanded. When it expanded to the size of a fist, the change occurred. From the root of the fruit, green twigs actually appeared. Those tender and green twigs slowly grew under the nourishment of the power of nature. At this moment, Chi-Yu already understood the power of the Yu clan. Yu Yi was clearly another plant soul. However, the change in the power of her body was obviously not as direct as that of a plant soul, nor was it as fast. Thinking of the plant soul, Chi-Yu naturally thought of her mute. He secretly decided that as long as he could return, the first thing he would do was to help the plant soul heal her vocal cords. It was originally impossible, but after he obtained the power of nature, it became extremely possible. After all, with the same source of energy and Kieran's marrow washing and tendon changing skill, the chances of success were at least 60%. At this moment, at the root of the fruit in Yu Ye's hand, the twigs had become longer and longer. The green twigs gradually separated from the twigs. After a short period of adaptation, the power of nature emitted from Yu Ye's hand also became stronger, promoting the growth of the twigs. All right, let's stop here. Chi-Yu stopped Yu Yi from continuing to consume energy. Yu Yi raised her head and looked at Chi-Yu. There was a glimmer of hope in her eyes. "Master, can I become stronger with this kind of power?" Chi-Yu smiled and nodded. "Of course you can. Don't you think that the most powerful power in this world is precisely the power of nature? If you can use your power of nature better and use nature to strengthen yourself, then you will definitely be able to become a true powerhouse and fight against those ferocious beasts." Yu Yi smiled bitterly. "Master, that is almost impossible. We Yu clan members all have this ability, but there is a huge difference in strength. For example, my ability is considered relatively strong, but it can only promote the growth of plants. When the original territory of the Yu clan still existed, I could command some special plants in the territory to defend or attack enemies for me. But that was the limit of what I could do. We can only absorb a little bit of the power of nature every year. Even the elders of the clan, who are over 80 years old, have very limited power of nature. Hearing this, Chiyu couldn't help but be stunned. How do you absorb the power of nature? Hearing this, Yuya's pretty face suddenly turned red. She looked to the side, not daring to meet Chiyu's eyes. Seeing her like this, Chiyu's curiosity immediately grew. Tell me, this is very important to whether or not you could become a powerhouse who can control nature. Yi lowered his head and murmured, in order to absorb the power of nature, we must immerse our bodies in nature. Every night, the people of the Yu clan will take off our clothes and bathe in the moonlight in our tree houses to feel the aura of nature. Our bodies will also allow the power of nature to enter our bodies through our pores. The more nature approves of someone, the more power of nature can be accumulated in that person's body. Chapter 152. Yu looked at Chiyu blankly and said, Master, what's wrong with that? We're feeling the blessings of the moon goddess and nature. Chiyu said angrily, No, of course not. Aren't you waiting for a pie to fall from the sky? Don't you think that if you have a cultivation method, you'll be able to absorb nature's energy better? In other words, you'll be able to increase the speed at which you absorb nature's energy and use a special method to become stronger faster. Yi frowned and said, But isn't that going against the heavens? Our Yu clan worships nature and would never do that. At this point, her pride as a Yu clan princess reappeared. Bullshit, that's too stupid. What's going against the heavens? What's worshipping nature? Are you Yu clan people just going to die at the hands of wild beasts your way of worshipping nature? Could it be that by worshipping nature, you've become nature's fertilizer? Chiyu said angrily. Yu looked at Chiyu in a daze, her eyes red. Chiyu's words had instantly evoked memories of that cruel scene. After saying this, Chiyu felt that his words were a bit harsh, so he softened his tone and said, Yi, I won't say anything else. I just want to ask you if you're willing to learn a cultivation method that can increase the speed at which you absorb nature's energy. You'll be able to make your natural energy even stronger. Yi nodded without hesitation and said, I'm willing. I'm already a sinner of the Yu clan. For the Yu clan, even if it's going against the heavens, I won't hesitate. Chiyu said angrily, Wrong. What's going against the heavens? Is increasing the speed at which you absorb nature's energy going against the heavens? I can teach you how to improve your ability to absorb nature energy, but have you ever thought about it? You're only one person. Even if you become stronger, can you fight against so many beasts? If you want to avenge your people, it's not something you can do alone. Everyone in the Yu clan must work together. Therefore, I only have one condition for teaching you this cultivation method, and that is to spread this cultivation method in the Yu clan in the future. Increase the strength of the entire Yu clan. Only then will you no longer have to fear the Juli people and no longer have to fear the beasts. You will become the strongest of the human race and protect us better so that we will not be harmed. Can you do this? Hearing Chiyu's words, Yi hesitated. She had never thought of leading her entire race to defy the heavens. Her deep-rooted thoughts made it impossible for her to accept Chiyu's suggestion. She looked at him, unable to speak for a moment. At this time, Snow Girl came over from the side. She came to Yuya's side and pulled her hand, saying, Sister, don't hesitate. This is not only the best opportunity for you, but also for the entire Yu clan. If you want to revitalize your Yu clan, you first need to be strong. Even if you think that this is really going against the heavens for the sake of your descendants, you should make this generation of the Yu clan stronger. So what if it's going against the heavens? At least you have worked hard for your people. When everything enters an era of peace, don't let your descendants cultivate anymore. Don't you understand the stakes in this? Yu looked at Snow Girl, then looked at Chiyu, whose eyes were flashing with anger. She nodded and said, Master, I am willing to learn this heaven-defying technique from you, and I am also willing to persuade my people. However, I cannot guarantee that they will all agree. After all, I am not the leader of the Yu clan. Even if I am afraid that all of my people will not listen to my advice. After all, for us, a race that belongs to nature, this is really... Sighing, Chiyu said, Do what you want. Perhaps, when you truly feel the effects of absorbing the natural energy, you will change your mind. Chiyu, don't force her. Actually, the Yu clan is not wrong. Wen-Ting's voice made Chiyu and the other two look at her. Hearing her words, Chiyu could not help but say, "Is the Yu clan not wrong? Don't you think that it is an extremely stupid thing for them to give up their talent like this?" Wen-Ting shook her head and said, "No, I don't think so. Chiyu, I know that you see the Yu clan a talent, but do not use it properly. You feel dissatisfied and feel unfair for them. However, have you ever thought about why the Yu clan would do this? From the birth of humans until today, although this is the era of ancient beasts, it has been many years. The intelligence of the Yu clan is not lower than that of other races. If you can think of this, it is impossible that the ancestors of the Yu clan did not think of it. However, the reason why the Yu clan is still like this is because they are in love with nature. Yes, the power of nature is a very powerful force. Moreover, this power is also very easy for the Yu clan to absorb with their talent. However, the power of nature is not infinite. It comes from the plants in this world. If all the Yu clan cultivates the cultivation method you mentioned, they will have to absorb a large amount of the power of nature. Perhaps when the number of the Yu clan is not large, this kind of absorption is not a big deal. However, once they cultivate like this, the lifespan of the Yu clan will increase as their natural energy increases. In addition, their descendants will continue to be born, and their need for natural energy will only become greater and greater. One day, when the natural energy of this world can no longer satisfy their needs, then what they will do is to destroy nature. When that time comes, it will indeed be heaven-defying. Therefore, I feel that the Yu clan did not do anything wrong. In order to protect nature, they gave up their talent. Therefore, I agree with Snowgirl. In order to become strong again, the Yu clan can have a generation to cultivate hard and increase their strength, but their descendants must still maintain the original tradition. Listening to Wen-Ting's words, Chiyu's expression gradually changed from the initial displeasure to agreement. When he heard the last few words, he subconsciously nodded. From Wen-Ting's meticulous analysis, he could not help but have a new understanding of the Yu clan. They were not just a proud race. At the same time, they were also a race that completely loved nature. Yi, I'm sorry. I apologize to you for what I said before. I apologize to the Yu clan. I take back what I said before. Chiyu looked at Yu Yi. The anger in his eyes had disappeared. How could he blame such a race? If the modern people had the environmental awareness of the Yu clan, then Earth would not become like that. Yu Yi gently shook her head and said, I know that Master said that for the good of the Yu clan. No matter what, I am willing to learn how to absorb nature's energy from you. At the same time, I will try my best to convince my people. Big Sister Wen-Ting is right. Our Yu clan's ancestors indeed thought that way. However, there were still some flaws in their thinking. If we blindly protect nature and completely give up our talent, then the final result will be like that day. We will be destroyed. If we want to protect nature, we must first have some people who can have the power to protect nature. And this power needs to be obtained from nature. I have already thought it through. No matter when in the future, our Yu clan will definitely have a certain number of Yu clan protectors. With the power of nature, we will protect the Yu clan's dignity and the environment. Chiyu smiled and said, That's right. It seems that we can still reach a compromise. All right, I don't want to say anything else. Since you are willing to learn, then let's start now. I actually don't know the specific cultivation method, but I can use the different cultivation methods of me, Wen-Ting, and Snowgirl to combine the power of nature to create a suitable cultivation method for Yu clan. As he spoke, he had already sat cross-legged on the ice. Under Yu Ye's shocked gaze, a rich green light had already filled the entire ice cave. Looking at Chiyu, who had closed his eyes, Yu Yi involuntarily cried out, How? How is this possible? Why does he have such a huge power of nature? Even if all of our clansmen were to work together, we would not have such a huge power. Wen-Ting came to Yu Ye's side and said with a smile, He can have such a huge power of nature because he himself is the source of nature and also the possessor of the purest power of nature. That is why when he saw that you have such good talent, He was angry at Yu clan for wasting your talent. Staring blankly at Chi Yu's ordinary face, Yu had mixed feelings. This man in front of her did not look outstanding, but he had the most revered energy of the Yu clan. His temperament had completely changed at this moment. Although he was not handsome, at this moment, he had a great attraction to Yu Yi. The fresh aura that was filled with natural energy was like a magnet that attracted her gaze and heart. Ever since she had met Chi Yu, it was only now that Yu Yi realized for the first time that Chi Yu had so many things that attracted her. This mysterious successor of the Huang Emperor was actually so special and powerful. Chi Yu did not directly do anything to Yu Yi, nor did he teach her anything. He only sat there quietly and began to cultivate. This time, he was no longer cultivating his Qilin cloud energy, but the energy produced by the origin of nature. Through Yu Ye's enlightenment, he suddenly realized that the origin of nature's energy was not as simple as healing and changing the body structure. This was something that could be easily understood from the attack power of the plant soul. Furthermore, Yu Ye's assistance in the growth of the fruit and the circulation of the natural energy had also given him great inspiration. At this moment, he was searching for a better way to cultivate the natural energy and convert it into his new ability. This was not only for the Yu clan, but also for himself to become stronger. During the 3 days, Chi Yu would fly in the air with the 3 ladies during the day, searching for the Kunlun mirrors with his mental strength. At night, he would open a cave in the Kunlun mountains for the 4 of them to avoid the cold and rest. When night came, it was time for Chi Yu to practice the force of nature. Over the past 3 days, with the help of Snow Girl and Yu Yi, he had gradually figured out the method. Although he did not need a cultivation method to absorb the force of nature, he had found a better way to use the force of nature. What surprised him even more was that the operation of the force of nature did not conflict with his own Kirin Thundercloud force at all. It was as if the 2 energies did not exist in the same space at all. And in these 3 days, although Chi Yu did not teach Yu Yi anything, Yu Yi had benefited greatly. While Chi Yu was pondering the cultivation method, she was also pondering after figuring it out. She was next to the source of nature. Although there were not many plants in this world of ice and snow, she was constantly absorbing the energy produced by Chi Yu and transforming her body, causing her originally weak force of nature to become thicker and purer. 3 days had passed, and now the estrangement between Yu Yi and Chi Yu had disappeared. Every night was the time she looked forward to the most. Ignoring the teasing gazes of Wenting and Snow Girl, she would take the initiative to sit beside Chi Yu every time. In her eyes, all the things that she originally hated about Chi Yu had now become things that attracted her. The Snow Girl was very sympathetic towards Yu Yi, and Wenting was also very close to this Yu clan girl who had lost a large number of her clansmen. Therefore, they let Yu Yi stay by Chi Yu's side. I still haven't found anything. Could it be that the Kunlun mirrors have the ability to hide their auras? Chi Yu sat in the cave anxiously. 3 days had passed, and they had already searched 3/5 of the entire Kunlun Mountains. However, not even a trace of special aura could be felt. As the area that had not been searched decreased, Chi Yu's worry grew. The more he searched, the more he wanted to return to his own era. These days, the figures of the Zodiac guardian god warriors often appeared in his mind, as well as the beautiful figures of Ryu, Ming Ming, and Shang Bing. Wen Ting comforted him. Chi Yu, you don't have to be too anxious. Wait until we have searched the entire Kunlun Mountains. If we still can't find anything, we will use a stupid method. Chi Yu glanced at Wen Ting and said, What stupid method? A cold light flashed in Wen Ting's eyes, and she said, It's very simple. We will bring some disaster to the Kunlun Mountains. I've been thinking for the past 2 days that you can't feel the aura of the Kunlun mirrors. Maybe it is because the ice and snow here are too thick. If we make a few avalanches, maybe it will be different. The Kunlun Mountains are inaccessible, and there are no living creatures. We'll turn it upside down. Chi Yu's eyes lit up, and he said, Good idea. You are right. Maybe it is the ice and snow that cover the aura of the Kunlun mirrors. These days, I have also found that the altitude of the peaks of the Kunlun Mountains is more than 6,000 meters, and the thickness of the old ice and snow is probably more than 1,000 meters. In this case, it is very likely to cover the aura of the Kunlun mirrors. Dad, do you feel that the ice here is different? Snow Girl suddenly said. Chi-Yu was stunned, and he looked at Snow Girl. Different? You mean? Snow Girl touched the clean ice beside her and said, When I was outside, I didn't feel anything, but as soon as I entered the ice house, I found that the density of the ice here is different from what we have encountered before. It is the same ice, but the density here seems to be much smaller. Just now, when Dad melted out of the ice house, it was a few seconds faster than before. I don't know if I'm too sensitive, but I feel that the ice here is a little strange. At this time, the sky outside was completely dark. In the ice house, although everyone's eyesight was very good, they could only see each other's faces. Hearing what Snow Girl said, Chi-Yu's heart suddenly burned with hope. His right hand flashed, and a fireball lit up. Under the illumination of the fireball, the ice house was lit up. Wen Ting, Snow Girl, and Yi all looked at Chi-Yu. Chi-Yu put the fireball close to the ice beside him and carefully observed it. The ice was still light blue. Although it was not transparent, it looked crystal clear and flawless. Under the illumination of the fireball, the ice was a little moist. The temperature of Kirin's true fire was naturally far from that of ordinary flames. At this time, the ice in front of Chi-Yu had gradually begun to melt. After a short period of observation, Chi-Yu did not discover anything different. He tried to use his mental energy to penetrate the ice, but the 10,000-year-old ice was incomparable to air. His mental energy could only penetrate about 100 meters before it was unable to go any deeper. Dad, do you feel anything special? Snow Girl asked. Chi-Yu shook his head and said, I don't feel anything different, but I believe in your intuition. Anyway, we haven't made much progress these days. Why don't we gamble today? Even if we fail, it doesn't matter. Wen Ting said, What are you going to do? I want to help you. Chi-Yu pondered for a moment before replying, I want to explore further down and see if there are any new discoveries if I go deeper into the ice body. Wen Ting nodded and said, All right, this will be our base for the time being. We will take turns to dig down, and then let Snow Girl feel if there are any changes below. If there are, it will prove that our search is correct. Thinking of this, Chi-Yu first expanded the cave they were in to about 5 meters in diameter. This way, there would be enough space for them to rest. Yi stayed here to guard, and Chi-Yu began to explore deeper. This was an iceberg. No one knew what changes there were below. Therefore, the best way was still to meld it with fire instead of relying on energy bombardment. With the thundercloud force activated, Chi-Yu's body emitted a blazing red light. His right hand trembled slightly, and a huge sharp weapon appeared out of thin air in his hand. This was a treasure that Kirin had transformed into. Not only could it transform into any weapon at will, it also had a strong side effect, greatly reducing the consumption of thundercloud force. This time, the form that Chi-Yu transformed Kirin was like a huge spinning top. There were spinning patterns around it, and the tip was completely emitting Kirin's true fire. Under the control of his mind, the huge spinning top with a diameter of nearly 1 meter began to spin. With the help of Kirin's true fire, the ice under the feet of the spinning top began to sink. Under the effect of Kirin's illusion, Chi-Yu's body slowly extended down along with Kirin's true fire. After a while, he had completely entered the newly opened cave. After these days of cultivation, although Chi-Yu's Kirin thundercloud force had not improved much, his foundation had become more solid than before, and his thundercloud force had also become denser. From Mo, he learned many ways to use the fire attribute Kirin's thundercloud force. More importantly, he also learned the special ability to transform thundercloud force from Mo. Although they were both Ink Kirin, the dual attribute Ink Kirin was more powerful than the single attribute one. Although it was more difficult to cultivate, the dual attribute Kirin could transform his thundercloud force into one attribute when needed. Although it could not produce a superposition effect, his continuous fighting ability was much stronger than the single attribute Kirin. Since Chi-Yu was a quadruple attribute Kirin, this situation was even more obvious. With this transformation ability, he could completely transform his quadruple attribute Thundercloud Force into Fire Thundercloud Force and continue to drill into the ice below him. Wen-Ting and Snow Girl were hiding in the ice house as they watched Chi-Yu's fire moving further and further away. They couldn't help but marvel in their hearts. The ice here couldn't be compared to ordinary ice cubes. It was definitely as hard as rocks, and could even be compared to steel. However, under the effect of Chi-Yu's real Kirin fire, the ice was gradually melted. This showed how powerful Chi-Yu's Thundercloud Force was and how terrifying the temperature of the real Kirin fire was. Chi-Yu didn't stop drilling until he only had about 30% of his Thundercloud Force left. At this moment, he had drilled more than 300 meters deep into the ice. He found that the deeper he drilled, the denser the ice was, and the harder it was to melt it. At the same time, the surrounding temperature was getting lower and lower, which greatly affected his body. However, Kirin's fantasy was indeed the top of the 8 treasures of Kirin before the appearance of Kirin. With its help, Chi-Yu greatly reduced the drilling time and Thundercloud Force. According to Chi-Yu's own estimation, he should be able to touch the mountain in less than 1,000 meters. Back in the ice house, Chi-Yu's face was a little pale. Wen-Ting hurriedly came to his side and used her energy to warm up Chi-Yu's body, helping him recover his Thundercloud Force. Yi sat on the side and quietly cultivated. Every day, Chi-Yu would tell her about his understanding of natural energy and then let her feel it herself. This was because Chi-Yu knew that compared to the cultivation method he taught her, it was far less profound for her to gradually experience it on her own. She could also better use the characteristics of the Yu people's bodies. Yu Yi, who was eager to improve her strength, was extremely diligent. As long as she wasn't searching in the air, she would immediately start cultivating. Everything else in front of her seemed to have nothing to do with her. Snow Girl said, "Father, did you find anything?" Chi-Yu shook his head and said, "Not yet. However, the deeper we go, the more difficult it is to drill. The density of the ice below is very high, and its hardness is far greater than that of steel. It is probably related to the heavy pressure of the ice and snow above. Snow Girl, go down and take a look. If there is nothing, we will continue to drill. Wen-Ting, I will have to trouble you." Wen-Ting rolled her eyes at him and said, "What are you talking about? Hurry up and cultivate to recover your Thundercloud Force. Your consumption is not funny." The Snow Lady leapt into the ice cave and went down to explore. With Wen-Ting's help, Chi-Yu also began to cultivate. He was not worried about drilling through the ice layer. With their current speed, even if the drilling was slower, it would take them at most a day to come into contact with the mountain. The question was whether they would be able to discover anything at that time. After a short while, the Snow Maiden flew out of the ice cave. She shook her head and said, "I still haven't discovered anything. My spiritual sense is greatly restricted down there. The ice down there is too dense, and I'm afraid any aura will be isolated." After hearing what she said, Chi-Yu's eyes lit up and said, "That's right. If this is really the case, then it proves that there's a big problem with the method we use to find Kunlun mirrors. The density of the ice is so high that the aura of Kunlun mirrors may be completely covered. We must drill down into this ice. As long as there is a trace of clue, it will not be a waste of effort." The drilling continued. This time, it was Wen-Ting's turn. However, she did not have a magic weapon like Kirin Illusion. Although her fire energy was not much weaker than Chi-Yu's, her overall energy was not as tough as Chi-Yu's. In addition, the density of the ice was getting higher. Wen-Ting tried her best, but she could only drill down to a depth of about 50 meters. Chi-Yu knew that it was not the time to be hasty. He did not rush to continue. Instead, he first restored his Thundercloud Force to its best state. After eating some fruits, he drilled into the ice cave again and continued the drilling process. Time passed gradually. For the whole day, Chi-Yu had entered the ice cave 3 times. Towards the end, the difficulty of drilling far exceeded his expectations. When he entered the ice cave for the 2nd time, he could only drill down 100 meters. On the 3rd time, he could only drill down 80 meters. The hardness of the ice was getting stronger, and the cold aura was even more unbearable. Even Snow Girl, who had the ice attribute, could not bear it when she went down. The density of the ice was too high. Chiyu simply did not let Snow Girl and Wenting go down anymore. He continued to drill down alone. 1 day passed, 2 days passed. The ice cave was getting deeper and deeper. Even Chiyu himself could not calculate how deep he had drilled. As the drilling became more and more difficult, the ice cave was no longer vertical, but close to the mountain, so it would inevitably become slanted. Another 3 days of drilling. Although Chiyu's body was fine, he was already very tired mentally. He repeated the same work every day, constantly restoring the thundercloud force, drilling, restoring the thundercloud force, and drilling again. However, he did not get anything useful. He was really a little impatient. However, he had already done so much. If he gave up halfway now, he would not be reconciled, so he could only continue. Whether it was Chiyu who had been working hard, or the 3 women, they did not notice that there was a gloomy shadow watching them silently not far from the ice cave where they were. Chapter 153. Chiyu nodded and said, "I think it's about time. However, it's very difficult to advance even an inch now. The density of the ice has far exceeded my scope of understanding. Every time I go down, I can only move less than 20 meters forward." When Ting looked at Chiyu's ashen face and said with a pained expression, "Chiyu, why don't you rest for 2 days before continuing? The temperature down there is too low. If this goes on, your body won't be able to take it before we discover anything." Chiyu smiled and said, "It's fine, although it's very difficult. However, in this kind of environment, I can continue to cultivate, and it's actually quite helpful for the improvement of the thundercloud force. Don't worry, my body will be fine. Moreover, we're getting closer and closer to the mountain. I think it won't be long before the bitterness is over and the sweetness begins. Now, I just hope that the efforts of the past few days haven't been in vain." At this moment, Yu Yi woke up from her cultivation. As soon as she opened her eyes, she saw Chiyu and said with some surprise, "Master, I seem to have found a way to cultivate natural energy. Although the natural energy here is very thin, I can already absorb it on my own." Chiyu smiled and said, "As long as you work hard, you'll definitely gain something. Congratulations. As long as you're willing to put in the effort, you'll definitely gain something." Yui nodded and picked up a few fruits to eat. These few days of cultivation had greatly increased her confidence, and she had gradually walked out of her sorrow. She had adapted to the climate at high altitudes, and her skin had already regained its original luster. She was no longer as afraid of the cold. Taking a deep breath, Chiyu stood up and walked to the side of the ice cave. He said resolutely, "I must go deeper today. I'm going." As soon as he finished speaking, he had already jumped into the ice cave. As if he was sitting on a slide, he went down the smooth ice wall and disappeared from the 3 women's sight in the blink of an eye. The speed of his descent gradually increased. From time to time, Chiyu pressed on the ice wall beside him to slow down his descent. Soon, as the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly, he arrived at the bottom of the ice cave again. Everything around them was dark. There was no light in the ice. Kiran's vision reappeared in Chiyu's palm. The huge flame drill brought warmth to the surroundings. The reason why the drilling speed was constantly slowing down had a lot to do with the environment. Although the Chilan True Fire had a high temperature and was a top-grade flame, in such a cold environment, the effect it could display was greatly reduced. Chiyu had to divide a part of his thundercloud force to resist the cold. As a result, the drilling time was gradually decreasing. Kiran's fantasy lit up, illuminating the surrounding ice. Suddenly, Chiyu felt his eyes blur, as if something had flashed past. After a slight shock, he became overjoyed. This was the first time he made a discovery during the entire drilling process. Without hesitation, he recalled Kiran's fantasy and replaced it with a fireball. He then looked at the place where the light flashed. The ice did not change at all. It was still the same, and the reflected light had completely disappeared. Chiyu did not give up. He carefully observed the ice in front of him and waited. He knew that as long as he could confirm that his observation was not wrong, then he would really have made a discovery. Just as Chiyu said, opportunities were always given to those who were prepared. After waiting for a full 10 minutes, the reflected light appeared again. As Chiyu was observing attentively this time, he saw it very clearly. It was a kind of halo, and the reflected light was the fireball in his hand. It seemed to fluctuate slightly, and the halo was emitted irregularly. Although it disappeared in an instant, Chiyu could not help but be ecstatic. After so many days of hard work, he finally made a discovery. At this time, in the dense ice, it was difficult for his spiritual power to explore more than a meter. However, with this discovery, Chiyu immediately took action. Kiran's fantasy changed the direction of the drilling and quickly drilled towards the location where the halo appeared. Wen Ting and Snow Girl were still waiting anxiously. Wen Ting calculated the time, and it seemed that Chiyu should be coming up soon. At this moment, Chiyu's voice came from the ice cave. Wen Ting, Snow Girl, come down quickly. His voice was full of surprise and disbelief. Suddenly hearing his voice, Wen Ting and Snow Girl were shocked at the same time. The two women looked at each other, and both knew that Chiyu must have found something. Snow Girl looked at Yi next to her and said, "Should we ask her to go down with us?" Wen Ting hesitated and said, "Forget it. The temperature down there is too low. If I don't protect her well, I'm afraid her body won't be able to bear it. Let her continue to cultivate here. Let's go down and take a look first." While speaking, Wen Ting left all the fruits beside Yi and jumped into the ice cave with Snow Girl. It didn't take long for them to descend more than 1,000 meters and reach the bottom of the ice cave. When they came here, they suddenly found that Chiyu was no longer digging downwards, but horizontally towards the mountain. The two women walked forward quickly, and after about 10 meters, they saw Chiyu. Standing there, Chiyu's body seemed to be stiff, squatting there without moving. Wen Ting was shocked and quickly called out softly, "Chiyu, are you okay?" A flame lit up in Chiyu's hand. Although his cloud walk had consumed a lot of energy, he was still extremely excited. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "Come over quickly. Look, what is this?" Snow Girl and Wen Ting heard this and came to Chiyu's side. The ice cave wasn't high, and the two women could only bend their bodies. When they came to Chiyu's side, they were completely stunned by everything in front of them. In front of the three of them, which was the end of the ice cave, was actually a huge natural cave. No, it should be called a natural ice cave. The cold air was constantly gushing from the ice cave to the cave where they were, and the temperature was actually a few degrees lower than before. What surprised them the most was that in this huge ice cave, there was actually a vast ocean. As far as the eye could see, this huge ice cave was actually a world of water. The halo that Chiyu discovered before was the reflection of the lake water in this huge ice cave. At this time, their position was at the side wall of the ice cave. Because the fireball in Chiyu's hand could only illuminate a certain area, they couldn't see how big this ice cave was. However, one thing was completely certain: the water here was extremely special. Conservatively speaking, the temperature in this ice cave was more than 70 degrees Celsius, but the water was slightly fluctuating and there were no signs of it freezing. This strange scene was enough to surprise them. Wen Ting was the first to react. The red light in her eyes lit up, and she waved her right hand forward. A fireball soared into the air and shot into the cave. When it traveled about 100 meters, it suddenly exploded, bringing countless sparks to the cave and illuminating everything around it. In a short moment of light, Chiyu could clearly see that the size of this cave was completely beyond his estimation. Under the illumination of the fireball released by Wen Ting, he couldn't see the other end of the cave. This scene couldn't help but surprise him. The frozen lake below was even stranger. The surface of the lake was constantly fluctuating, and the originally calm lake water seemed to be at the center of it, bringing about slight ripples. "Could it be here?" the Snow Lady asked curiously. Her voice reverberated throughout the spacious and empty ice cave. Chiyu took a deep breath. His lungs were stimulated by the cold air, and his whole body shivered. "I hope the answer is yes." His many days of hard work had not been in vain. Although he hadn't found the whereabouts of the Kunlun mirrors, this strange frozen lake was already his reward. Who would believe that there was nothing special about such a strange place? As they soared into the air, Chi-Yu hugged Wen Ting's slender waist. The Kirin pearl had already turned blue. By absorbing the water energy molecules in the air, it was helping him recover the thundercloud force that he had used. Although the temperature was very low, the water energy molecules were initially very large. During the absorption process, Chi-Yu's physical strength had already started to recover rapidly. Snow Girl flew beside Chi-Yu, and the three of them flew towards the lake together. When they reached the surface of the lake, Chi-Yu realized that the surrounding air seemed to have become even colder. He waved his right hand, and a wave of thundercloud force moved the lake water. Through his spiritual power, Chi-Yu was surprised to find that the temperature of the lake water was actually much lower than the surrounding air. It was probably around minus 100 degrees Celsius. Water of this temperature was definitely a miracle among miracles. But how did it reach such a low temperature? Why didn't it freeze? With a heart full of doubts, Chi-Yu and the other two continued to fly towards the depths of the ice cave. At the same time, he put on his Kirin Red. With the help of the Kirin Red's light, he could barely bring some light to the surroundings. He followed the ripples on the surface of the lake and gradually moved towards the depths of the lake. At that moment, what Chi-Yu wanted to find was the source of the ripples. The ripples were not caused by the wind because they were too regular. In this quiet ice cave, what was the source of the ripples? He spread his spiritual power outwards to explore the area of the ice cave. There was no longer any obstruction from the ice, so Chi-Yu was surprised to find that the area of the ice cave was so vast. Even with his spiritual power, which could explore thousands of square kilometers, he could not sense the end of the ice lake. It was obvious that the ice lake occupied almost the entire mountainside of the mountain where he was. What exactly existed in such a strange ice lake? The discovery of the ice lake was enough to make Chi-Yu excited, but what made him a little uneasy was that under the detection of his spiritual power, there was still no change in the aura of other energies. Obviously, the aura of the Kunlun mirrors did not appear here. As he searched for the ripples, it did not take long for Chi-Yu to finally find the end of the ripples. The sound of the water was very soft, but it was especially obvious here. When they descended to the vicinity, they found that there was actually a small spout. The spout was about 1 meter in diameter, and it was the source of the ripples on the surface of the ice lake. The three of them stopped above the spout. Almost at the same time, Chi-Yu and Snow Girl had a special feeling. This feeling came from the spout, but the range was very small. They could only feel a special aura above the spout. The aura was extremely changeable, sometimes cold, sometimes hot, sometimes elegant. Just the moment they felt its existence, there were at least 10 different situations. Although the aura was invisible, the air above the spout was slowly twisting. The three of them looked at each other and saw the surprise in each other's eyes. At such a close distance, even Wen Ting, whose spiritual power was slightly weaker, could feel the uniqueness of the spout. Is it here? Chi-Yu's eyes lit up. It should be here. Even if it's not the Kunlun mirrors, there must be something hidden in such a strange aura. Snow Girl suddenly exclaimed, "Ah, I know what the water here is." Chi-Yu looked at her in surprise, revealing a questioning gaze. Snow Girl said, "The water here is actually the legendary frozen spring. It is said that it will never freeze. It belongs to the category of heaven and earth treasures. I have only heard about it from my elders, but I didn't expect to see it here. No wonder I felt something was wrong when I entered the range of this frozen lake. Oh my God, there are so many frozen springs, it's simply immeasurable." Chi-Yu asked curiously, "What's the use of this frozen spring? Don't tell me it can bring the dead back to life?" Snow Girl shook her head and said, "Of course not. However, the frozen spring has great benefits for all people who practice cold energy. Even a drop of the frozen spring can increase one's cultivation. The frozen spring here is thousands of meters deep in the ice, and the temperature is so low. It can be said to be the best of the frozen springs. If I'm not wrong, there must be a 10,000-year cold jade under this frozen spring. That is the real, priceless treasure. As she said that, Snow Girl's gaze had already landed on the center of the eruption, and her eyes were filled with enthusiasm. Chiyu said, "If that's the case, then it's even better. Snow Girl, don't you practice cold energy? With so many frozen springs, it must be very beneficial for your cultivation." Snow Girl nodded lightly and said, "However, there are too few frozen springs here, and the cold energy is too overbearing. It's impossible to practice here, so we can only bring the frozen spring out and absorb it bit by bit. Dad, let's not rush this. Let's look for the Kunlun mirrors first. There must be a 10,000-year cold jade under the mouth of this frozen spring. Otherwise, the eruption of the spring wouldn't be so gentle. I think the real mouth of the spring under the 10,000-year cold jade might be the place we're looking for, because the aura emitted from the frozen spring is too special. If it's just the frozen spring, it should emit pure cold energy. Any living thing that touches it will be frozen in an instant. However, this hot spring isn't like that. To be able to produce so much energy, there must be something else affecting it. It's very likely that it's the Kunlun mirrors we're looking for." Chiyu nodded and said, "I hope so too. How about this? You guys wait up here, and I'll go down first. The temperature here is too low. If you guys can't handle it, then go back up and wait for me." Ting took a deep breath and said, "Chiyu, do you really want to go down? The temperature on the surface of the water is already so cold. Wouldn't it be below?" Chiyu said without hesitation, "My cultivation is higher than yours. Going down is the best choice. Since we're already here, are we going to give up just because of the cold water? Don't worry, I'll be careful. Once the energy can't withstand the cold of the frozen spring, I'll come up immediately." Ting looked at him deeply and said, "All right, but you must be careful here. Don't be careless. Snow Girl and I will wait for you here. Don't force yourself." Chiyu said, "I will." As he said that, he started to adjust the thundercloud force in his body. The water molecules here were very abundant. After a period of time, his thundercloud force had recovered to about 70%. With the support of the thundercloud force that was converted from the thundercloud force, the surrounding temperature increased. Looking at the spring in front of him, the Kirin mirror in Chiyu's right hand shone brightly, and a huge shield appeared in his hand. At the same time, he released the Kirin mirror with his left hand. What he needed to do was very simple. He needed to use his energy to forcefully separate the water surface and go deep into the frozen spring as little as possible. "Thank you very much for bringing me here. If it wasn't for your hard work, it would have been very difficult to find the entrance to the Kunlun mirrors." A low and cold voice suddenly appeared in this quiet space. Chiyu and the other two were shocked at the same time. Their eyes instantly fell in the direction of the voice. A ball of dark blue light shone on the surface of the lake where they had passed. A human about 2 meters tall appeared out of thin air. His face was covered with a layer of black mist. His tall body's energy was completely restrained. However, that invisible pressure still made the three of them feel as though they couldn't breathe. In the crook of his left arm was the pale Yu Yi. Chiyu's eyes were filled with shock. He said in horror, "Bull Demon King." The huge body of the Bull Demon King almost instantly appeared in front of the three of them. He suddenly laughed, and his laughter was full of pride. "You didn't expect this, did you? Actually, I've been here for a long time. Did you think that you could escape from me that day? If it wasn't for the fact that I wanted to follow behind you to find the whereabouts of the divine weapon, I would have made my move long ago." After a short period of fear, Chiyu gradually calmed down. The appearance of the Bull Demon King had already caused his slightly excited heart to sink to the bottom. At this moment, the temperature of his heart was probably a few degrees colder than the frozen spring below. Having seen the true power of the Bull Demon King, Chiyu of course knew how powerful he was. Although his body had shrunk, his power did not decrease at all. Even the king of the divine beasts, Emohua, could not defeat a super beast. How could the three of them fight against him? "I don't believe it. How could you follow us?" Chiyu said calmly. The Bull Demon King was obviously very proud of himself. He was not in a hurry to destroy Chiyu and the others. He said, "It's very simple. That day, when we were in the Yu clan's territory, I sensed your remaining aura. I couldn't be more familiar with Kieran's aura. At that time, my spiritual power had already sensed your existence. However, I was not in a hurry to make a move. After you rescued this Clan girl, my spiritual power was deep in following you. Although your domain was very powerful, how could you escape after being locked on by me? After that, after arranging my subordinates, I came over. Actually, I was quite lucky to be able to fight against the creator of the universe net. I've been thinking about it ever since I heard that the Xianyuan sword has appeared. Although I'm stronger than any of you divine beasts, I can't ignore a divine weapon. If I can get my hands on a divine weapon, then I'll be invincible in this world. Therefore, these days I've been asking about the whereabouts of the divine weapon. I did not expect to meet you. After transmitting your conversation to me through your spiritual power, I found out that you were actually looking for the Kunlun mirrors. Although the Kunlun mirrors are not powerful weapons, they are still one of the top 10 divine weapons. Therefore, I quietly followed behind you and waited for you to find them. With you ants helping me find the specific location of the Kunlun mirrors, it saved me a lot of trouble. If not for you, I really would not have thought of looking for the entrance inside the iceberg. When Ting and Snow Girl slowly moved closer to Chiyu, they both knew that the possibility of surviving in the face of the Bull Demon King was infinitely close to zero. Even so, they would not give up without a fight. Taking a deep breath, Chiyu looked at Yu Yi, who was held in the Bull Demon King's arm, and said indifferently, "Bull Demon King, how about we talk about a deal?" The Bull Demon King snorted disdainfully and said, "Do you have the right?" Chiyu said indifferently, "I really don't, but don't forget, I'm the new owner of the Xianyuan sword. In the face of the most powerful weapon in the world, do you think I have no chance of winning?" The Bull Demon King suddenly laughed out loud. "Chance of winning? Brat, are you stupid? I've been following you for so many days. Don't tell me I still don't know how strong you are. If the Xianyuan sword was in the hands of Mo Hua, I might really be a little afraid. Unfortunately, it has chosen you. With your current strength, it is already very good that you can pick up the Xianyuan sword on the Genesis network. Divine weapons can greatly increase one's strength, but first, one must have the ability to use the divine weapon. Moreover, there is such a big gap between your strength and mine. Even if you can use the Xianyuan sword, you are definitely no match for me. What right do you have to compete with me? If you want to fight, then I want to see how much of a threat the Xianyuan sword in your hands can pose to me." The feeling of despair. It permeated around the bodies of Chi Yu and the other two. Their strength was already far inferior to the other party, and now, their situation was completely understood by the other party. Chi Yu did not expect the Bull Demon King to be able to endure and follow the three of them. If he really obtained the Kunlun mirrors, then not only would the three of them be finished, he would probably destroy all the mythological beasts. "Bull Demon King, do you want to get the Xianyuan sword?" Chiyu asked indifferently. The Bull Demon King frowned and said, "Kid, what other tricks are you trying to play?" Chiyu said proudly, "If my guess is correct, the Xianyuan sword is definitely more important to you than the Kunlun mirrors. After all, the Kunlun mirrors are not weapons, and they will not be very useful to you. However, the Xianyuan sword is different. It is the world's most powerful weapon. If you can have it, then you will be truly invincible. Am I right? I think you also know that the Xianyuan sword is extremely spiritual. If you want to get it, it's not as simple as killing me. You just have to kill me. As long as I die, the Xianyuan sword will return to its original restriction, and you will never be able to obtain it. However, if I am willing to give the Xianyuan sword to you, you can become its new master." The Bull Demon King was tempted. Chi was right. Among the 10 great divine weapons, there were only 2 that he wanted the most. One was the King's sword, the Xianyuan sword, which represented benevolence, and the other was the Pangu axe, which represented creation. Only these 2 divine weapons were most suitable for him. However, he also knew that the Xianyuan sword could only be used by humans, and it would not recognize any ferocious beasts. As for the Pangu axe, there was no whereabouts at all. At this moment, when he heard what Chiyu said, his arrogance immediately decreased. He said with interest, "You are willing to give a Xianyuan sword to me? All right. As long as you are willing to give it to me and allow me to use it and become its new master, I can let the few of you leave this place. At least for a period of time, I won't chase after you." Qiyu shook his head and said, "No, the value of the Xian Yuan sword. Is it only the lives of the four of us? The deal that I want to make with you is not that simple." The Bull Demon King laughed coldly and said, "Kid, don't push your luck. Although I want to obtain the Xian Yuan sword, it is not absolute. In this world, there is no creature that is a match for me in terms of strength. As long as I destroy you, the threat that the Xian Yuan sword poses to me will naturally disappear. After that, I will obtain the Kunlun mirrors, and I will also be able to dominate the world." Qiyu smiled. At this moment, his confidence had gradually recovered. "I'm not pushing my luck. I just want to take what I need from you. If you want the Xian Yuan sword, I can give it to you. However, I have two conditions. First, you must help us obtain the Kunlun mirrors. Second, after we obtain the Kunlun mirrors, you must let us go and swear not to harm us." "Qiyu, are you crazy? How can you trust a guy like him?" When Ting said anxiously. Qiyu said calmly, "No, I believe in his oath. As the king of the beasts, I think that he will not bully juniors like us. Moreover, after obtaining the Xian Yuan sword, our existence will no longer be a threat to him. Why would he go back on his word?" The Bull Demon King snorted coldly and said, "On account of what you said, I will spare your life. That's right. If I have the Xian Yuan sword, the Kunlun mirrors will naturally be of no benefit to me. I can agree to your conditions, but you must give me the Xian Yuan sword." Qiyu said, "Impossible. Before we obtain the Kunlun mirrors, we will not give you the Xian Yuan sword. Otherwise, if you do not help us find the Kunlun mirrors, what else can I do? Moreover, you know that my strength is not very strong, and I still need the Xian Yuan sword to protect me." The Bull Demon King said coldly, "Then why should I believe you?" Qiyu said, "Right now, Yu Yi is in your hands as a hostage. She is our partner, and we cannot abandon her. Moreover, if we do not give you the Xian Yuan sword after we obtain the Kunlun mirrors, do you think we can escape from your hands?" The Bull Demon King looked at Qiyu and seemed to be thinking about something. Suddenly, he laughed. "Kid, I almost agreed to your conditions. Unfortunately, you still showed a flaw." Qiyu's heart trembled, and he said reluctantly, "Bull Demon King, you are not going to go back on your words, are you?" The Bull Demon King shook his head and said, "Kid, you are still too naive. Your words are indeed very attractive to me, and the Xian Yuan sword is indeed what I want. However, there is one thing that you have overlooked. The Xian Yuan sword can only be used by humans. Moreover, with the Xian Yuan sword's spirituality and its own aura of a ruler, it will not be able to attach itself to me. That is not something that you can control. Your promise to me now is all nonsense. Kid, it is your good fortune to die in my hands, and your bones will be buried in this frozen spring." The Bull Demon King's sudden change of heart caught Qiyu by surprise. The dark blue light that was originally surrounding the Bull Demon King's body suddenly expanded. This underground frozen lake was so vast that the light emitted from his body could actually illuminate such a vast space. The pressure did not only come from the front, but from all directions. It enveloped Qiyu's group. Although the Bull Demon King was currently only 2 meters tall, the pressure that he brought was not any different from when he was 100 meters tall. Yu Yi, who was being held under the Bull Demon King's armpit, had an intense sadness in her eyes. Qiyu could clearly see that her body was already emitting a green light. The light was very faint, and the creation's network did not spread to the surroundings. The Bull Demon King's attention was all on Qiyu, so he did not notice the change in Yu Yi. The Bull Demon King raised his other hand, and the dark blue light condensed into the shape of a palm in front of him. That huge palm slowly closed, and with every inch that it closed, the pressure around Qiyu's group would increase. At this moment, it was already a matter of life and death, but Qiyu's expression was still so calm. He seemed to be waiting for something. Chapter 154. The black mist on his face disappeared, and the Bull Demon King revealed his true appearance. His eyes had turned blood red. 20 meters away, The giant hand he had released was only 5 meters away from Chi-Yu and the other two. The huge aura slowly approached, and the Bull Demon King's eyes were full of ferocity. He was not in a hurry to make a move, as if he was waiting for something. Chi-Yu's strength was indeed not enough in front of the Bull Demon King, but the Bull Demon King had his own plans. The Xianyuan sword was, after all, a divine weapon with the most powerful attack. If Chi-Yu really used the ultimate Kirin arm to activate it, it would still cause a certain amount of damage to the Bull Demon King. Therefore, the Bull Demon King was using his own huge energy to create pressure, suppressing Chi-Yu and the other two. At the same time, he gathered his own energy, in case Chi-Yu suddenly launched a desperate attack. Chi-Yu floated there without moving. The black and silver light around his body became increasingly weak under the pressure of the Bull Demon King's energy. The black and silver light began to distort under the pressure, and Chi-Yu's face became paler and paler. However, he still did not move. Kirin's illusion and Kirin's mirror formed two shields in front of him. Just as the Bull Demon King was getting a little impatient and was about to launch a destructive attack, suddenly, Yi, who was under his armpit, underwent a huge change. The emerald green light exploded almost instantly, and the aura of life instantly enveloped the Bull Demon King's body. Yi spat out a mouthful of blood. It went straight for the Bull Demon King's face. The Bull Demon King was shocked. With the natural energy that Yi had cultivated these days, it naturally could not cause him any harm. However, the sudden attack still affected his spirit a little. And at this moment, Chi-Yu suddenly moved. What he wanted was this moment. A dark red light instantly lit up behind Kirin's mirror and Kirin's illusion. Using the moment when the Bull Demon King was affected by the natural energy, it had completely enveloped the surrounding 100 meters. The Bull Demon King only felt the armpit lighten. Yuya's body had disappeared into thin air, and he himself was in a dark red world. It was the 1,000 changes of Jade Pearl domain technique. Chi-Yu had used the momentary opportunity created by Yu to use this super domain. At the same time, he had used his teleportation ability to forcefully rescue Yu from the Bull Demon King's grasp and trap the Bull Demon King within the 1,000 changes of Jade Pearl domain technique. A furious roar rang out from the Bull Demon King's mouth. He never imagined that Chi-Yu would still be able to use this domain in the face of such immense pressure when he had completely suppressed his opponent. The rage of the Bull Demon King represented an explosion of energy. In just a split second, the enormous energy in his body had already gushed out in all directions. That was an enormous energy that was filled with destructive power. In the blink of an eye, the dark red interior of the 4 stars domain technique was filled with an explosion of energy. The 1,000 transformations of the 4 stars domain technique had the ability to weaken an opponent's energy attack to a certain extent. However, this was only a domain after all, and there was a limit to the defensive effect it could achieve. In a split second, the terrifying energy released by the Bull Demon King had already reached the critical point of the 1,000 transformations of the 4 stars domain technique. This was not to say that the 1,000 transformations of the 4 stars domain technique was not strong enough. It was just that the Bull Demon King was too powerful, and Chi-Yu's strength was far inferior to his. Some things could change in a split second, and this was exactly what was happening now. Chi-Yu had used the instant the moonlit night created to use the 1,000 transformations of the 4 stars domain technique to save her. He also used the instant the 1,000 transformations of the 4 stars domain technique affected the Bull Demon King and immediately used his own energy to envelop the 3 women. Then, he rushed toward the mouth of the spring below. The water waves parted, and under the protection of Chi-Yu's thundercloud force, the 4 of them directly entered the mouth of the frozen spring. At the same time that Chi-Yu and the other 3 women disappeared, he also withdrew the 1,000 transformations of the 4 stars domain technique when it reached the critical point. Kirin was the only thing that Wenting's father had left in this world, and was also Chi-Yu's most powerful magic weapon. He did not wish for Kirin to be harmed in the slightest. Everything in front of the Bull Demon King's eyes returned to normal. He saw that Chi Yu and the other three women had instantly entered the frozen spring, and the enormous energy that he had released suddenly spread out in all directions. Amidst a loud boom, the entire ice cellar shook violently. Countless pieces of ice and ice powder fell from the sky, and the ice cellar seemed to be on the verge of destruction. Fortunately, the 1,000 transformations of the 4 stars domain technique had weakened the energy that the Bull Demon King had exploded with. Moreover, the ice that formed the ice cellar was compressed for countless years and was many times harder than steel, so it was not destroyed by the Bull Demon King's explosion. Even so, the area of the ice cellar had expanded greatly, and a large amount of ice was destroyed by the Bull Demon King's powerful attack. The angry roars did not stop. Seeing that Chi Yu and the other 3 women were escaping into the spring, the Bull Demon King did not hesitate to follow them, and a bloodthirsty light shone in his eyes. The only thing he wanted to do now was to destroy Chi Yu. In the face of the fatal crisis brought by the Bull Demon King, there was no time for hesitation. Chi Yu did not dare to delay at all. The moment the 1,000 transformations of the 4 stars domain technique came into effect, he immediately expanded his thundercloud force and instantly enveloped the 3 women's delicate bodies as they dove into the spring. Chi Yu's application of his thundercloud force was very ingenious. The outer layer was the water thundercloud force, because the water thundercloud force was the closest to the frozen spring here, so it would not be easily repelled by the energy and coldness contained in the frozen spring. Within the water thundercloud force, there was only the wind thundercloud force. Relying on the characteristics of the wind thundercloud force, he tried his best to prevent the frozen spring from passing through the water thundercloud force into the wind thundercloud force. As for the innermost layer, there was the fire thundercloud force, which used the fire thundercloud force to resist the invasion of coldness from the outside. In this way, the threat of the frozen spring could be minimized to the greatest extent. With a smile, Chi Yu's eyes revealed a faint cold light. He put his hands together in front of him. The moment the 4 of them entered the mouth of the frozen spring, he immediately used his spiritual power to activate the outermost layer of the thundercloud force, causing the 4 of them to plunge rapidly into the water. Chi Yu was very clear that the Bull Demon King would definitely be furious when he found out that he had been tricked. At this moment, it was a matter of life and death. Since Kiran was the one who recalled it, it was to prevent the Bull Demon King from destroying it. At the same time, when the Bull Demon King released the seal, Kiran had already used the infinite changes technique of Jade Pearl under the control of the Thundercloud Force that Chi Yu had separated from the bodies of the 4 of them, directly using the invisibility effect of Kiran. At this moment, they seemed to have assimilated with the frozen spring and were rapidly sinking into the mouth of the spring. Although everything that had happened in the blink of an eye, it had fully condensed Chi Yu's wisdom and courage. Within a short period of time, his thundercloud force had been greatly outputted, allowing him to complete the task perfectly. If he had not practiced Kiran's ability with Mo Hoa for a month, it would have been absolutely impossible for him to be so proficient in using his ability. In the mouth of the frozen spring, they did not encounter a strong suction force like when they entered Xuanyuan's tomb from the Green River Whirlpool. On the contrary, the first thing Chi Yu felt was an unusual repulsive force. This repulsive force seemed to be trying to expel their bodies from the ice. The surging energy instantly enveloped the energy shield that Chi Yu had cast and violently pushed them upwards, causing Chi Yu's descent to be greatly delayed. Chi Yu's profound ability had already clearly sensed that the Bull Demon King was pouncing towards them. At this moment, the frozen spring had such a strong repulsive force. If the Bull Demon King really caught up to them, even Kiran's invisibility skill might not be able to escape. Faced with everything that was happening in front of him, Chi Yu could not help but feel anxious. However, his mind was still somewhat clear despite his anxiety. A golden light flashed and appeared under the 4 people's feet out of nowhere. It was the huge Xianyuan sword. Chi Yu used his ability to control the 4 people's bodies to line up and stand on each side of the Xianyuan sword's blade. Then, With the help of the energy form that Kirin had created, their energy shields became flat and merged with the Xianyuan sword. In this way, they looked like the blade of a huge axe. Without the need to inject thundercloud force, the Xianyuan sword's sharpness was immediately displayed vividly. When the powerful repulsive force of the frozen spring encountered the sharpness of the Xianyuan sword, it immediately split into two. The four people's bodies quickly broke through the water, and in the blink of an eye, they had already sunk more than 10 meters. The aura of the Xianyuan sword was too strong. Although this method allowed Qi Yu and the others to descend rapidly, it was also under this situation that the aura of the Xianyuan sword directly exposed their location. At this moment, Qi Yu lowered his head and looked down. He vaguely saw that there seemed to be something dark green under the illumination of the Xianyuan sword. However, the frozen spring was very deep. Although they had greatly increased their speed of descent, they were still about 100 meters away from the faint dark green light. Even in the water, under normal circumstances, a distance of 100 meters would only take an instant for Qi Yu. However, the situation was completely different now. The temperature in the frozen spring was much lower than they had imagined. At the same time, Qi Yu not only had to fight against the cold, but he also had to activate Kirin Yin and protect the three women. In this way, he was already overwhelmed after consuming a large amount of thundercloud force to drill into the ice cellar. Although the distance of 100 meters was very short, the mouth of the frozen spring already had a body full of ferocious aura. The Bull Demon King did not use energy to protect his body at all. He plunged directly into the frozen spring from the air. Although the mouth of the frozen spring was cold, it was nothing to his strong body. The moment he entered the water, he did not need to use his eyes to immediately sense the presence of Qi Yu and the other three. No, it should be said that he immediately sensed the presence of the Xianyuan sword. His eyes glowed fiercely in an instant, and his almost limitless magical power surged in an instant. He punched out, splitting apart the obstruction brought by the rapid currents in the mouth of the frozen spring. He actually reached the speed of lightning in the water and chased after Qi Yu and the other three. At this moment, it was also the moment when Qi Yu discovered the emerald green below. He was still 100 meters away from them. The Bull Demon King's eyes revealed a ferocious glint. At this moment, his mental strength had already surrounded Qi Yu and the other three people through the frozen spring. Although he could feel the sharp aura of the Xianyuan sword, he had already made up his mind to destroy Qi Yu. In terms of absolute strength, he was far superior to this Kirin of the four auspicious clouds. However, Qi Yu had managed to escape several times, even though he had the upper hand. Moreover, he had even obtained the Xianyuan sword. Deep in his heart, the Bull Demon King had already deeply felt that the threat that Qi Yu posed to him was constantly increasing. He definitely did not wish for the emergence of a powerful existence among the divine beasts that could contend against him. Therefore, he no longer had any intention of playing around with or making use of Qi Yu. He only wanted to kill this Kirin of the four auspicious clouds before it could grow stronger. The moment the Bull Demon King entered the water, Qi Yu could feel it. Although their bodies were descending rapidly, Qi Yu's mental strength was directly sealed by the Bull Demon King's mental strength. He knew that disaster was coming. At this moment, if the Bull Demon King caught up with them, he naturally knew what the outcome would be. Not to mention that he was not in his best condition. Even if he was in his best condition, he was still far from being a match for the Bull Demon King. Perhaps it took them a few seconds to descend 100 meters, but this short period of time was enough for the four of them to be destroyed several times. Without any hesitation, Qi Yu was ready to fight with his life. He thought that even if he died, he would protect the safety of the three people. At this moment, when Ting and the other two people were under the protection of Qi Yu's energy, so they did not feel the approaching danger. The Bull Demon King was here. The dark blue light shrouded them like an incomparably huge net. The huge energy actually dispersed the frigid spring to both sides. As long as it touched the bodies of the four people, it would be enough to tear them into pieces. Black and silver light shone from Qi Yu's body. The energy of Kieran's origin was instantly raised to the limit. His right arm had already started to sparkle with twisted silver lightning. The energy of the ultimate Kieran arm had already been activated. In an instant, the Xinyuan sword fell into Qi Yu's hands. With the injection of Kieran's thundercloud force, a golden light shone. The water below was instantly cut open by the incomparably sharp energy. Under the activation of Qi Yu's 1,000 changes, the Jade Realm technique forcibly enveloped the three women who had just reacted. They instantly fell through the gap that was created by the water, while Qi Yu himself rushed up with the Xinyuan sword in his hand. "I'm so pitiful. Qi Yu, help me protect my white lady forever." Just as Qi Yu was about to fight the Bull Demon King to the death, a lamenting voice sounded in his heart. Then a black light shone from his body. A huge figure had already drilled into the water above and rushed up ahead of him. It was the deep-sea nether snake. Before Qi Yu could react, the white lady's voice also sounded in Qi Yu's heart. "King, take care." Another light shone from Qi Yu's body, but this time it was white. The white lady, who had returned to her original form, rushed out only one step slower than the deep-sea nether snake. Her sorrowful voice spread in the water. "Are you willing to let me be alone for the rest of my life?" The next moment, two huge bodies, one black and one white, had already rushed up to the Bull Demon King without hesitation. Even though they knew what their end would be, at this moment, they did not hesitate at all. Qi Yu only felt that there was a roar in his mind. He never expected that at this critical moment, the deep-sea nether snake and the white lady would come forward bravely. The coldness of the frozen spring could not stop these two ancient behemoths, who were bursting with life, just like the white tiger who had saved Moonlit Night. At this time, they had burned their own lives and raised the energy of their lifetime cultivation to the limit. They did this just to give Qi Yu a chance to escape. No. Qi Yu looked up to the sky and roared. Looking at the deep-sea nether snake and the white lady rushing up, his eyes had become blurred. The deep-sea nether snake's firm voice came from the water. "Well, let us live and die together. Qi Yu, go quickly. Don't let our sacrifice be in vain. We are still counting on you to avenge us." The water of the frozen spring turned purple. Under the situation of stimulating its own flame of life, the deep-sea nether snake finally exerted the powerful strength that Qi Yu had when he first met him. In the huge purple spring, mixed with countless white light arrows, the life energy full of the spirit of sacrifice had completely burst out at this moment. Qi Yu's eyes were blurred. When he first met the deep-sea nether serpent, he had always been wary of this powerful, dire beast. It was not until later, when he had the white lady, that this fear completely disappeared. However, Qi Yu had never thought that the deep-sea nether snake would sacrifice its own life for him. The blood in his body was boiling, but Qi Yu knew that at this time, he must not be impulsive. His lips had been bitten until they bled. He resisted the thought of fighting to the death, and left a string of poignant tears in the frozen spring. His body fell in an instant, and he chased after the three women below with the Xinyuan sword. The frozen spring, which had been quiet for many years, boiled. In just a moment, the water level of the frozen spring rose by 100 meters. Purple and white, the two colors of the frozen spring, erupted in an instant. But at the moment of eruption, it was completely swallowed by the dark blue light that was enough to destroy everything here. With the unwilling roar of the Bull Demon King, the huge bodies of the deep-sea nether snake and the white lady disappeared into thin air. At this time, the water in the entire frozen spring had been stirred up with a loud rumble. Not to mention the deep-sea nether snake, even the deep-sea nether dragon king, was far from being a match for the Bull Demon King. There was no need to predict the outcome. There could only be one result. However, the deep-sea nether snake defended its dignity with its life, and also fulfilled its responsibility as a messenger. Although the strength of the deep-sea nether snake and the white lady was far from being comparable to the Bull Demon King, they managed to block the Bull Demon King for a few seconds by burning their lives. At the same time, The deep-sea nether snake's last burst of thunder power also paralyzed the body of the powerful, fierce Beast King. It could only watch as Chi Yu and the other 3 people fell to the bottom of the lake. Chi Yu's expression was very ugly. It was unprecedentedly ugly. Of course, he knew what had happened, but his pale face did not affect his movements. After sinking to the bottom of the lake, the first thing the 4 people saw was a huge jade stone with a diameter of more than 3 meters. The jade stone was white, but it was shining with a faint green light. Around the jade stone, extremely cold spring water kept gushing out, and the green light was emitted from under the jade stone. The 4 people knew that this was the Millennium Cold Jade that the Snow Girl mentioned. Such a big piece of cold jade, even if it was just a fragment, would definitely be a priceless treasure in Chi Yu's era. However, at this time, he had no mood to appreciate it. Without any hesitation, the Xianyuan sword was switched to his left hand, and Kirin in his right hand transformed into a long crowbar. With the injection of Kirin's thundercloud force, he directly inserted the crowbar into the side of the cold jade stone. Furious Bull Demon King had already rushed down at this time. The discomfort brought by the death of the deep-sea nether snake had completely disappeared in the face of his ferocious strength. Just as he was about to directly attack Chi Yu and the others in the water, he suddenly saw a green water column rushing towards him. He couldn't help but be startled, and his anger instantly calmed down a little. He didn't have a magical weapon like the Xianyuan sword, but he had his own valiant strength. He pressed down with both hands and actually forcibly blocked the water column that was rushing towards him. However, the downward momentum was also reduced a little. At this time, Chi Yu and the others had already entered the spring. After entering the spring, the powerful impact that Chi Yu had imagined did not come. He only felt the energy around his body slip, and the original downward momentum suddenly became horizontal. In the next moment, the surrounding space had completely turned green and rapidly flashed around the energy barrier that he had set up. Under the protection of Chi Yu's energy, the 4 of them were first pulled horizontally by attraction force, and then instantly slid downwards. Chi Yu, Big Brother Nether Snake, and the others. Wen Ting's eyes were full of sorrow. She had seen everything that had happened just now. Although she didn't understand the use of the token, she could tell from Chi Yu's expression that the Nether Snake and the White Lady had met their end. Chi Yu took a deep breath, and his lips trembled a little. In order to save us, they have already sacrificed themselves, but they definitely won't die in vain. Wen Ting, I have a favor to ask of you now. None of us knows what we will face after entering this spring, and we don't even know if this is the place where the Kunlun mirrors are kept. If he still catches up with us later, then take Snow Girl and Lady Yu Yi and find a way to escape. Don't worry about me. His voice was very cold. It was resolute, and there was no room for negotiation. Looking at Chi Yu's cold gaze, Wen Ting knew that the deaths of the deep-sea nether snake and the White Lady had deeply hurt Chi Yu's heart. At this time, the only thing she could do was to support her man. Nodding silently, Wen Ting didn't say much. At the same time, she also raised her hand to stop Snow Girl and Yu Yi from comforting Chi Yu. At this time, what Chi Yu needed was to calm down. They didn't know what was in the frozen spring. If the Bull Demon King hadn't appeared, they could still slowly explore it. However, at this time, there was no way back. They could only keep moving forward. As for whether they could obtain the Kunlun mirrors and whether they could leave this place alive, they could only leave it to fate. With a smile, the light in Chi Yu's eyes softened a little. He looked deeply at Wen Ting, held her hand, and put Kirin on her shoulder. At the same time, he tightened his grip on the Xianyuan sword. He was indeed the king of the Zodiac guardian deities. Even in such a desperate situation and under the stimulation from before, he still forcefully suppressed the agitation in his heart and quickly recovered the thundercloud force that he had exhausted. The Bull Demon King entered the frozen spring about 10 seconds later than Chi Yu and the rest. The impact of the jade-green water column caused him a lot of trouble. In the end, he had to rely on his powerful strength to condense energy into a sharp blade and cut the water column apart before he could enter the frozen spring. He had absolute confidence in his strength. Not to mention the frozen spring, Even if he was in magma, he wouldn't feel the slightest bit of fear. A dark blue light surrounded his body as he gathered his unparalleled strength. Under the guidance of the mysterious energy in the frozen spring, he chased after Chi-Yu and the rest. At this time, they couldn't see each other and didn't know where the end was. The jade-green light made the 5 people, including the Bull Demon King, feel as if they had entered an emerald world. Here, the energy waves were very strong, but they couldn't be described. Just like what Chi-Yu had felt before, the energy in the frozen spring was changing very rapidly. It was constantly changing and fluctuating irregularly. In order to have a stronger strength when facing the Bull Demon King, Chi-Yu still forcibly activated his Kirin's ascending cloud technique. He didn't hold back and absorbed the ever-changing energy without any scruples. The input of energy was much faster than he had imagined, but the changes of the energy were so fast that he had no time to fully digest and absorb it. The excess energy kept colliding in Chi-Yu's body, bringing him heart-wrenching pain. At this moment, his behavior was close to madness. If the source of nature hadn't completely transformed his body would have been torn apart while absorbing the ever-changing energy. However, it was with the energy of the source of nature that Chi-Yu managed to withstand it. The thundercloud force in his body also miraculously recovered rapidly. Suddenly, Chi-Yu and the other 3 people felt their bodies lighten. The huge pressure disappeared in an instant, and even the cold feeling disappeared. The 4 people were thrown into a huge space at the same time. A mist of blood burst out from Chi-Yu's body. At this moment, with the effect of Kirin's ascending cloud technique, his thundercloud force had recovered to its peak state. The 4 people calmed down. Chi-Yu pulled Wen-Ting, and Snow Girl hugged Moonlit Night to stabilize their bodies in the air. They were surprised to find that they had really come to a world of jade. It was a huge, circular space, completely composed of smooth jade. The edges and corners of the jade reflected a faint green light, turning this place into a green world. The light was not dim at all, and everything around them could be seen clearly. At the same time, they also felt an ever-changing energy constantly fluctuating here. Although there was no water, it constantly washed their bodies like waves. This circular jade space was very large. It seemed to be a closed sphere, and on the jade walls, the uneven edges and corners were constantly flashing with green light. At the top and bottom, there was a circular door with a diameter of about 2 meters, and the spiraling green energy was constantly flashing in the green light. When they first arrived here, the 4 of them were already dizzy and disoriented. Chi-Yu knew that one of the 2 circular doors must be the entrance, and the other one must be the one they had passed when they came here. Now, he was almost sure that this was the place where the Kunlun mirrors were forbidden. The ever-changing energy was probably brought to this place by the Kunlun mirrors. The reason why he was so sure was mainly because of the Xianyuan sword. As soon as he entered this world, he felt the hilt of the Xianyuan sword in his palm heat up, and a strange feeling came into his heart. It was the feeling of being connected to his flesh and blood. The Xianyuan sword seemed to be longing for something, and also seemed to be searching for something. Chi-Yu knew that his choice was not wrong. There were really Kunlun mirrors buried here. But which door should they enter from? Chi-Yu's thoughts did not last long before they were completely destroyed. This was because the dark blue figure followed closely behind them and also entered this misty jade world. The moment the Bull Demon King rushed out from the door above, it was equivalent to telling Chi-Yu where the real exit was. He shouted almost without any hesitation, "Go down, quickly!" He rushed up with the Xianyuan sword in his hand.